Welcome, one and all, back to the halcyon days of the original console war. Back to, you have to be of a certain vintage to have appreciated it and been there at the time when the house of that Mario built rose up and dominated the console landscape. But one developer stepped forward, dropped their nuts on the table, and had the audacity to say what no one else could: Sega does what Nintendo don't. And I would like to give a special thanks to composer Dean Harris for giving me permission to use the music that I used in that wonderful intro that took me 2 weeks to make. That, if you're wondering, and he has his YouTube channel, is a remake of the track from Road Rash 2. The Vermont track is probably the hardest track in the entire series. And I would like to thank all of my panelists for being here today, and we'll have some that are going to be coming in a little late. Mr. Robert was not able to be here. He'll be here a little bit later. Let me introduce my illustrious panelists with me, and thank you all for being with me here today. First, from my own hometown, Mr. Judas Jones, a fellow Sega aficionado. One half of the Heroes No Capes podcast, Mr. Left Eye Ego. Apologies to Abomination, his friend and partner, Abomination AJ. AJ, I love you, but you got to be of a certain vintage to appreciate have been there, and he's told me himself that, well, you know, his first Sonic games were all 3D. So
no,
sorry, not this time.
Not around
AJ.
here. Not around here.
Not this time, AJ.
No.
My good friend, the master of Negromancy, Mr. Anime Sparkster. Thank you for being here, sir.
Hola.
And over from the BookTube side of things, Bryce from Shelf Centered. Looking as formal. He apparently thought this was going to be a formal event.
Yeah, what's the deal, everybody?
Dress for the job you want.
I mean, I don't have pants on.
Okay, well, it's fine then. It's fine. You're good.
I put on pants for you guys. I put on pants for you guys. And Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, sir. Thank you for being a bit of a last minute stand-in for one of my friends who was not able to make it.
Hey, thanks for letting me crash. I appreciate it.
So, let me bring up the questions here. So we're gonna a little out of breath, a little nervous. I've been waiting 2 weeks to get to this point. So, and of course I lost all my stuff. So what we're gonna do, I got some questions for everybody. And I kind of want to get us all on the same place about where we were. What made this system so influential, so important to us individually? You know, was it peer pressure? Was it you just had to have the games on there? Was it something to do with it was a gift on Christmas morning just from your dad? And we'll go ahead and go around the clock, and being the gracious and humble and handsome host that I am, I'm going to let my guests go first before I answer. And David, sorry, Mr. Judas Jones.
That's okay.
Tell me about your relationship with the Sega Genesis.
Well, for me personally, man, it was just a matter of I barely remember life before the Genesis, you know. So I think the Genesis came out around 1990. Am I right, guys? What was the release date for the Genesis? 90, yeah. I want to say so. So I mean that's the same year that Hogan fought Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6. So there's not a lot of life before that for me. So I was about 4 or 5 years old. So it was a Christmas gift. Had to have it. We had every system in the house at the time. So Sonic being all the rave, we had to get the Genesis too. So,
and wasn't he though? Ego, what about you?
So, all right. So I guess I'm not sure who else is going to understand this, but Mr. Douglas, you probably can. I was homeschooled until I was like 13 or 14, right? Yeah. And so when you're homeschooled, you're either one of the two kids. That weird kid that can't eat anything other than like tater tots and chicken nuggets.
Oh, you mean my kids?
I mean, it's different now.
Yeah.
But it's either that or you're just like the ones that were like socially inept. And so I was neither of those, but, growing up in suburban America, all you know is like, oh, that's the Eagle family. Yeah, those are the homeschool kids. And it came with saying that you're either one of those two. So basically I had no edge, right? And so I think we got the Sega Genesis in 1992 or 93 as a Christmas gift. And it came with Sonic and like one controller. And the great thing about it was Sega Genesis had more edge when it came out than Nintendo. Nintendo was like, oh my God, this cool fantasy game. Sega was like, no, we're in your face about it. Everything is going to be live and in color in your face. So now the homeschool kid that's got a little bit more edge. I'm like, hey guys, you guys want to club over my house? Like, ew, it's egos. It's the homeschool family. I got Sega. They're like, oh, you got street cred now, right? I'm like, yeah, I got street cred.
Right.
So it gave me instant credibility amongst the peer groups that I had. And the first time I ever said the F word was when I was playing Sonic 2. So all
Me
wholesome memories
too.
for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Valid.
Your F-bomb V card, huh? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was like, I can't forget that. It happened Christmas Day, the day I got it. I'm playing an hour, and it's the bonus one where I got to get the rings, and I couldn't get it, so I just drop an F-bomb in front of the whole family. So,
Merry Christmas.
oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
Oh, and the whole thing about the '90s was it started to have like a bit of a a bit of an edgy and emo and goth and gritty and all that decade had that edge to it. And the Genesis was definitely a contributor into parts of the culture that kind of leaned in that area.
yes.
Anime, how about you, sir?
Well, I think you guys are pretty much hitting all the right nails on the head. When I think of the 90s being a 80s baby, I always call myself 80s baby, 90s kid, because I was born at the tail end of 80s. I was in 88, born in 88. So I know the 80s because 80s stuff was always on in the background, and like they were still airing a lot of 80s cartoons. I mean, my parents still had their Intellivision and Coleco, so those were my first game systems. But then my actual first game system was a Nintendo, but because Nintendo was sort of like already considered like getting old by the time I was like in elementary school, and then Genesis was the new kid on the block. And like a lot of you guys, I know Ego, you were saying that you being that gave you that street cred on your block, having the Genesis. Similarly for me, a lot of my friends were either didn't have game systems or like played their older siblings' game systems, and I would be over their houses and I would be playing like Sonic 2 and Street Fighter for the first time, Mortal Kombat, and I was like, oh my freaking God, what is this? And then I'm going home, I'm still playing Mario 3 trying to beat Bowser, and I'm like, yo, this is fun, but like, where's the Sonic? Like, what is this? You gotta go fast, man. Come on,
where's the blood? Yeah,
you gotta go fast, man.
Gotta
and
go
then one
fast.
Christmas, and then one Christmas, my parents surprised me with a Genesis with Aladdin and the Lion King came in it. And it had one of the
that was a brutal Christmas.
Absolutely
Hard as hell.
My God, man!
These turds these days think Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Elden Ring is hard.
Yeah, play Lion King on the Genesis.
Get past those flinging monkeys and come back to me.
Freaking monkeys, man! Every time, man, got me. But yeah, that was my introduction. Yeah, whenever I think of the 90s, I think Sega Genesis is like one of the peak 90s things, definitely.
Bryce, how about you, man?
Oh man, oh gosh, this is just seriously, you guys are bringing me back so much. This is great. I grew up single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. We, like there's no gaming system in sight, and all of our friends had Nintendo. One friend, the best one clearly, had a Sega, and my brother and I realized one day, I don't know, it took us ages. We were like, what if we save all our money and we'll just buy our own? Okay. And we did that. And that's what we were just like, Sega all the way. I think Sonic is just a little cooler than Mario. I don't know. Did I say that? I love Mario. I'm not saying I don't love Mario. I love the SNES and all that. But something about Sonic, and like you guys said, going fast, and you get to like, you roll up and then you're over, around all these loops and everything. So for us, we just, we were so committed. My brother even bought, because he was better at saving than I was, he bought the Game Gear, the ill-fated Game Gear.
Oh, gracious.
And I remember playing lots of Lion King on that one and getting destroyed. But we're committed all the way, all in on Sega, and it was just funny because it's like I don't know really why, but it got us, and we just loved some of those games. Yeah, it had some edgier ones. I think Mortal Kombat was a good one on there. Anyway, it just so much fun. And yeah, Aladdin, I remember that was the one where I first cussed and my brother was just like, whoa.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Calm down, man.
Aladdin definitely tested your patience. I never beat most of my Genesis games. I ain't gonna lie. I have a terrible twitch reflex, so it makes platformers and things like that really very difficult for me. It's kind of why when I found the JRPG genre in the PlayStation era, I was like, oh, you don't require my dumb brain to smash a button as quickly as possible.
I still haven't beat Comic Zone. I've been trying since I was like 12 years old.
God,
So.
I love that game. I love the
man.
concept of it, but again, it's the difficulty level was just too much for me.
Yeah.
Mike,
It still is.
good segue, Mike. Well, tell me about your time with the Sega. What would end up wanting to buy that, or
like
what was your
others
time
here? I grew up in a divorced family, so my folks were like, "Yeah, you aren't getting any game consoles. We can't afford it." My brother was 6 years older than me, so he actually saved up money of his first job and he bought a Super Nintendo. So we would play that. And then there came that weird separation thing when my parents were divorced, where they started having this weird competition for our love.
The war. Yeah.
So I used that just like a good 12-year-old that's self-centered and wanted everything for himself that he didn't have that all his friends had. I said, well, you know what I want? I want a Sega Genesis. That way we'll have both. Me and my brother kind of worked this out because I was gonna be like, oh, I'll get my own Super Nintendo. That way my brother quit kicking me out of his room. But we worked it out to where we could get both. And I think what's the thing about Genesis that I find special is, like, I've never been a choose guy. I love all these things. I do. But Genesis was just different enough. I felt like I loved my Zelda. I loved my Mario and stuff. But I was like, there was just something that almost felt like a rebellion with Sega Genesis. It was just like going against the grain of like what it was like being like that person who was like, you know what? I'm going to go watch that show on HBO instead of another Marvel series. That's what it felt like. I'm going to watch that edgy thing. That's what I kind of felt like with the Genesis. But I feel like Genesis has been, they've gone so bad about protecting their legacy, because like that Sonic movie came out and it was received really well. And they're like, oh, people like this? Well, no shit. I mean, no shit, they like it.
Right.
So I feel like they really did a bad job with that, to where a lot of people have considered the Genesis almost like an afterthought at this point. I'm like, you guys really don't know that they were beating Nintendo for about 2 years. They really were. They were on top. They were WCW taking over WWF for about 2 years.
Yes,
They were
sir.
like, oh, shit, what do we do now?
Things that were new and different. It's and I'll tell you this, and don't laugh when I say this. Believe it or not, the Sega Genesis kind of altered the direction of my life. Okay. That I might have to tell you a story to tell this one. Okay. A lot of my relationship with video games goes back to my dad. My dad grew up dirt poor on a farm. He grew up, working on old cars. His idea of video games, he didn't even have toys. His idea of video games were, something at a gas station, you put a quarter in it, you play for 5 minutes, you go on with your life. So in the heyday of the Nintendo, which I wanted one, and believe me, I'm not trying to sound like I'm bitter or anything. I was not able to get an NES when all my contemporary friends, had one, and I really wanted one. But I also understood, we were pretty poor. We were very frugal, and Dad couldn't afford to drop, that kind of money on something that in his eyes was just a toy. To him, games was something you fed a quarter in a machine, you walked away when you're done. Begged him. And by the time I got a Nintendo, it was almost time for the Super Nintendo. And so what happened was I was coming off of being a huge Ninja Turtles fan. I caught the ad for the Sonic comic, right? And I read that and I watched the cartoon. I was fully immersed in Sonic Mania. So inevitably, Dad had the, hear me begging for, oh, Dad, I want a Sega so bad. Please give me one for Christmas. He told me, and it's no uncertain terms, like, you've got a Nintendo. You don't need, okay. That's kind of what I was fighting with his mentality. He told me point blank, if you want a Sega Nintendo, Sega Genesis this badly, you're going to have to save up your allowance, which was like $5 a week at that time. And you're going to have to save up for it, earn it yourself. And then I will use he would come home from work with change in his pockets, put it in a bucket, and usually he'd take it to the bank once or twice a year. and cash it all in. He would use that money to buy me games if I bought the system. So I had a choice. I could get a Super Nintendo, which I admittedly I liked. I liked the hit stuff I wanted, but Sonic was only on Genesis. So guess what? I went with Genesis, and it took me a summer and an entire autumn, and it felt like years. I never wanted something so bad as that Genesis, saving up that money, doing extra jobs for an extra $5 here and there. I found $10 on the ground outside of the skating rink I used to go visit, and I was like, "This is going right to the Genesis fund." And when I did eventually get my Genesis, it felt like an accomplishment, and it taught me, right? It taught me that if I want these things bad enough, I have to work for it in life.
I did that with
I
my
have
kid,
to earn
the
it and appreciate the things that I earn myself.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
really
good
helped
timing. That's
shape
good
kind of
timing.
how I was, and it's a weird roundabout way. And Dad always had this rule: you can have one system or the other, you can't have both. The same thing happened when the next system wars come. You'd have a PlayStation or
So you went
a
Dreamcast?
64. Huh?
Dreamcast?
No, I never had a Dreamcast. That controller bugged the shit out of my hand. I can't stand it.
I loved it. I loved it. I don't know why.
I will say shout out to, I mean, for you, John Douglas, shout out to you, and for all of our parents that bought them, shout out to them as well. I was looking up what this technically would have cost adjusted for inflation. Like, it's like $500 if you adjust for inflation
Yep.
when it
Oh, yeah.
originally came out. So it's like,
Sounds
you know
about
what?
right. Yeah.
I gotta call my parents to say thank you, because that does not look cheap.
That was one thing that the Genesis had over the Super Nintendo, is that it was just a little bit cheaper.
Right.
It was just a little bit cheaper. And even though admittedly, like, the hardware was just a little bit behind, it's still, kind of like someone who's creative is able to, do something really good with, limitations. They were able to do something really good with the limitations of the hardware that they had, with some, graphic glitches. And you can't get the sound of the Genesis anywhere else but the Genesis.
Nah.
Even on emulators, it sounds wrong.
I remember getting it with I'm pretty sure I got it was the Genesis with Sonic 2.
Yeah, mine had Sonic.
Yes.
Yeah. Yours had Sonic 2?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
Sonic.
Later,
That's all we had. We never had Sonic 1. I only had Sonic 2.
I'm the same way.
And
Yeah.
then we got it like
same.
the next year or something.
Yeah.
I think
you
I
know.
had
I'm
the
the old
model.
one
There was
here,
a
is what
Model
you're
2
telling me.
unit.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Also-
like the more like condensed unit, right? It
No,
only
it
Yeah.
had that, and it was one
It
of the
had, like,
rare
a
ones that had the
smaller
two
one.
controllers. I had the two controllers. In the
Oh,
little
there you go. See, we had to pony up.
Well,
Like, there's two of us.
No, but John, I respect that.
I
I made my oldest do that with a Nintendo Switch. It's like, yeah, sure, of course I can afford to pay that for you, but you aren't going to respect it. So because his grandparents buy him everything, so I had to convince his grandparents not to buy him the damn Switch. Right. They're like, oh, let's buy it. Like, no, we're trying to teach him a lesson, and he did. He saved up for like a whole year. To get it.
Fortunately for my kids, but I can't. They're not going to learn that lesson with game systems because of my dad's rule about that. Like, when I was 17 and I wanted a PlayStation 1, but we had a 64. Of course, when I was 17, I was emancipated. I was technically an adult. I'm like, what is Dad going to do? Kick me out of the house because I buy a PlayStation? I saved up my own money and I bought a PlayStation 1. And I love that one too. But we're not going to talk about PlayStation tonight. Ever since then, I just buy all the systems. All the systems, as long as they got games on it that I want.
Because we buy them all now.
My kids ain't gonna learn that lesson.
My kids don't understand it at all,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Like,
The
So
problem
like,
I
it's
have
on
every
your tablet, and he goes and he plays his VR, and I'm like,
I want to like, I had to suffer so much. You're like, I don't want you to have to suffer like I did.
Right.
Right.
Should make them suffer. Should make those children suffer. Anyway. Next round of questions. Obviously, what were your favorite games?
Of course.
David?
Start this one off. So, man, obviously, guys, the usual suspects, right? Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, anything to do with Sonic, pretty much on the Sega was a go-to.
Sonic Spinball.
Not quite, but I did actually. I don't hate the Sonic Spinball game.
I liked it.
I did actually like that one. I remember. I mean, and this is obviously a thing with the Genesis, but renting. I rented that game a lot.
Yeah.
That was a Blockbuster rental often. So aside from the usual suspects, though, man, some of the more obscure ones, or maybe not obscure, but less talked about, but like General Havoc. I don't know if anybody remembers that one. It was like a army base, kind of like cannon fodder See, no one knows what I'm talking about. But it was a really kind of it was like a weird army RTS type of game. It was pretty cool.
David, hold on just a second. I want to bring this up just real quick. I hate to interrupt you.
No,
I want to give a shout out to my friend Raven Gray. I signed him on over here. He comes over from my friends list on Boomer's Book. He's a good friend of mine. This motherfucker right here loved that Sega Genesis so much, he named his daughter Genesis.
Oh, there you go. Jeez, get any more real than that.
Do a dab for me, Raven.
And they should jump on. They feel like a bigger fan than me because I didn't go that far.
Good thing he didn't name her Altered Beast or anything. Streets of Rage, Golden Axe. I thought the beat 'em ups on Genesis were king. I thought they were a lot better than like the Final Fight series on Super or whatever. And then
literally
almost every licensed Disney game, with a couple of exceptions, but all the Mickey Mouse games, man, like
Castle of Illusion
sounds funny. Castle of Illusion, World of Illusion, and then I just grabbed this one out of my collection. This is one of my favorite games on Genesis. I answered multiple questions with this coming up, and you guys are gonna laugh, but I don't know if you can come through, see, but it's Ronald
McDonald.
Ronald, you've got the deepest cut here. Good.
Ronald McDonald Treasureland, man, and like that's because that's like multiple nostalgia trips for me. So it's like a mix of Genesis, obviously, and then obviously like just the early '90s, like the McDonald's. All the characters with the grimace and everything, So man, I love that game. It's made by the same people that made Gunstar Heroes, so it's really good actually. It's a really fun game. So anyway, that's me.
That was not one that I had. There was whenever it came time to buy, because remember, kids, if you're not of a certain vintage, you didn't have GameStop back in the day. Let me line this out for the younger younglings that are watching, the Padawans. Back in the day, when you wanted a video game, you had to go to like a Toys R Us, right? And you had to go along in the aisle where the games were at, but the games weren't there. The pictures of the game boxes were there, and you grabbed a slip and you brought it to this massive cage, like a freaking gun cage, and you gave it to the clerk on the other end, and they gave you the game. And that Walmart had them, ended up later having them behind glass when they kind of expanded to superstores, but that was where I had to buy the games. That was the only place to buy them.
Rekka Wolf in the comments just said Babbage's, and that's what we had here in Baton Rouge.
Never seen a Babbage's around.
We had an electronics boutique at the mall, or we just went to a Toys R Us, like you said, which we'd always take that slip, and they'd be like, "Oh, I guess we're out of stock." I'm like, well, thanks for getting my hopes.
Thanons. I only come here once or twice a year to get games.
Like, no wonder you guys are in a cage because I'm going to kick her.
The used ones at the Blockbuster or something like that. That's where you could get a couple really cheap games. But they were used and abused.
Yeah. But this stuff was all hardcore, man. Like the system was hard plastic. The controllers you had to try to break those controllers.
Dude, we had cartridges that looked like they'd went through the apocalypse. Yeah, and they still worked.
Yeah.
They still worked.
Even the game cases are like hard plastic.
I love
that. I love the
clamshells.
Love the clamshell cases. This is one of my favorite reasons to collect for the Genesis is the clamshell cases. I love it.
Yeah. So, Eagle, what about you, man? Favorite Genesis games?
It's a two-way tie between Mortal Kombat 2 and NBA Jam. So I'll go Mortal Kombat 2 because that's the first time I figured out how to do a fatality. It was with Scorpion, and I figured out the one where he actually takes his face off, blows fire, and sets the guy on fire, which was awesome because I did it against Sub-Zero. So I was like, fuck yeah, I did it.
Genesis didn't use sweat. They used blood, baby, in their Mortal Kombat. They used sweat.
Awesome.
Doing.
Yeah, between that and getting the Toasty guy to come out, it was so much fun playing that.
Toasty!
Yes.
Oh, I forgot to throw him in the intro. That would have been cool. Yeah. Oh, well.
NBA Jam. I played that.
I got you.
Good Lord, I played that so much.
Boom, shakalaka.
On fire.
Yeah. It had all the phrases in it. Plus, it's where I learned to trash talk. Because, again, you're homeschooled. You'll know how to trash talk. You just in your face, I'm on fire because you couldn't curse in the house. So
in your homeschool, you polite talk. Yeah, like, yes, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, but that, you can't fight your brothers. So the only way you can actually beat them up is to beat them in NBA Jam, and there's no way they can complain. It's like, Mom, Dad, he beat me in NBA Jam. I was like, yeah, because you suck. I'm sorry, you stink. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. So those are my two favorite games for those reasons.
Nice.
Animane?
That was so dope. Real quick,
I know your
wanna-
answer, Animane. I know your answer right away.
Okay, you already know, but I do want to piggyback real quick because you were bringing up Mortal Kombat. My first fatality was actually the same thing, and it was right before I was going to church. I was just messing around, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I've watched my older cousins do this stuff for so many times. I just did it. Somehow I did it, and I remember bragging to all my friends at church that I just learned how to do a fatality with Scorpion. No one talked to me. No, none of you can tell me anything. No one can tell me anything. But yeah, some of my favorites. Obviously, Sparkster.
Yeah.
As I put in my name here, but that's actually when if you see me on some social media sites, my actual full screen name is Animane Sparkster for that very reason. Even before I started doing YouTube heavily, I would call myself like Sparkster88 or something like that because I just loved. As much as I loved Sonic, when I first found Sparkster, and I played Sparkster before the actual first game, I didn't even know that was the sequel until I actually played it. And it said Rocket Knight Adventures 2 at the intro screen. I'm like, wait, this is the second one? Okay. Well, I just played it. And then I would play like Rocket Knight Adventures in like high school because I had a weird resurgence where I started playing Genesis again in high school. And I was like, okay, Rocket Knight Adventures technically is a superior game, but Sparkster always hold a bigger place in my heart.
I can understand that because personally, and I played Rocket Knights first, but so I was naturally a little disappointed when Sparkster did not have the same graphical quality, gameplay. Like it was not a superior sequel. It was to me, and I'm sorry, I understand. Special place in your heart.
Yeah.
For me, I was
absolutely.
always like, this is disappointing.
Absolutely. And look, when I went and found the original Rocket Knight Adventures and I saw how much, it was blast processing, but it was way more blast in Rocket Knight Adventures 1.
A lot more.
That man was moving and moving, yo. And like just the complexity of the stages and the bosses and mini bosses, was so much better. Everything was better, but still
that was Konami at its like their best.
Oh, an absolute peak Konami, man. There's a couple Konami joints up here for my favorites because Contra Hardcore like stayed in rotation. Ooh. Me and my friends, we would play that joint all day, every day because when we figured out that there was multiple paths in the game that you could take, it was done. It was a wrap. We weren't even playing nothing.
Did Konami do Hyperstone Heist?
Say it again?
Ninja Turtles? Did they do that one?
They did.
That was a Genesis game, yeah.
Konami, I think so, yeah, because I know they had done at least one or two of the ones on Nintendo, so I think they did that one too.
And the Castlevania game, I think, was them as well, right?
Yeah, they were. Konami just stayed straight bangers, man.
Yeah,
they didn't. I could be here. I don't want to hog the mic too long, but Eternal Champion, Streets of Rage 2, just a lot of the ones. And weirdly enough, I had become very familiar with the whole bloody game thing, which was his own genre for a while because you had that Killer Instinct, but then Eternal Champions and like the whole idea of the characters from different time frames and stuff, it was just so dope, man.
I like that. Fun fact about Eternal Champions, I didn't find out until like a year or so ago that there were fatalities in that game. Oh, yeah. Like no one who owned the game ever told me that. No one, I'd never seen images of it. And then I went back and looked at the compilation of them. I'm like, oh my god. Oh like, yeah. How did this not get more play?
Yeah.
What about you, Bryce?
Oh man. Gosh, I guess like play wise was like between Sonic 2, Aladdin, NBA Jam. And I still, to this day, pick up basketball games. If someone makes 3 in a row, I'm like, he's on fire.
Boom, shakalaka,
Yeah. Like, to this day, it's had that kind of an impact. Echo the Dolphin, I played a lot.
Yes.
Too.
The later stage in that were so hard.
Oh, they were like, I never completed it. That's for sure. It was so hard.
I watched a friend play it on like God mode, and I'm like, how is anyone supposed to actually beat this? Like, he was playing with, invincibility on it, and I was like, how? I don't know.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Sonic 2, Aladdin is the only one I think I've really beaten. Like that's the only one, and that was rough. I remember Jafar laughing at me so many times, so many times. Hence the rage quit multiple times. And I, the like da, 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 like in your head forever. But yeah, those are my main ones. I did do like Earthworm Jim, that was a fun one. Just like kind of just interesting powers, like it's a friggin' earthworm. It's so silly, but we weren't allowed the bloodier games until we were a little older, and so that's when we finally got Mortal Kombat 2, and that was like, whoa.
Oh yeah.
Like the fatalities and like trying to look them up because it wasn't like you had to go like get like an actual like book,
a guide.
You had to get a guide. You had to go in the alleyway at like midnight where no cars and nothing was on the street, right? And it couldn't be like a friend because he wasn't gonna tell you the damn fatality because he wanted to be the only one who knew
like dealing drugs,
right?
First one to eat you,
right?
And lord it over you.
Wait, you got codes? You got to write them down for me. Like you're passing. So yeah, I do kind of miss that era. Mike, what were your favorite games?
I don't want to pick. I mean, you guys going last year, you guys have picked a lot of my favorites. I don't want to regurgitate those. I'll just say I like those two. Look, guys, I'm a fantasy booktuber. Of course, Golden Axe was my shit, right? I mean, that was everything. That was what I wanted. It was like, okay, you're going to take these awesome beat 'em up games that I love, and you're going to add swords and magic to it. Heck yes, let's do that. So, Golden Axe, obviously, Echo the Dolphin. Like I said, I love him. What was cool about that is when that came out on Sega CD, is you could take the disc and put it in a CD player, and it was a soundtrack, and that was like my sleep soundtrack for a long time.
That's great.
It really was. But you guys were talking about bloody games. For me, it was a revelation when I got Splatterhouse 2 and 3. Those games were so damn R-rated. It was like, how did they get away with this?
Yeah.
Playing those at 12 years old, man, that was eye-opening to me. That was everything. It was like Friday the 13th meets like Evil Dead. It was amazing. I still love those games so much. But I'm really an RPG guy, so obviously the Phantasy Star games were just the only thing I think that ever came close to Final Fantasy for me was Phantasy Star, for sure.
And they're great in their own right.
Oh, yeah.
I was not into the genre at that time. And now I'm kind of looking back going, I'm going to go back and
like
play one of them one
very
day.
much like a Dune kind of storyline. I love Dune.
Yeah.
It was very Dune-ish with Final Fantasy elements in it. So I really did always appreciate that about it.
A little bit of Sword and Planet. And I always appreciate that. When you get those things that blur those lines between fantasy and science fiction that, they inevitably created to, separate the genres. To me, the genres have always been the same, but that's a different.
I think I always kind of preferred Genesis for the sports games. I thought their sports games were a lot better than Nintendo's. Lakers versus Celtics, NHL '94. How much you guys were into sports?
I had that game.
Super high impact football, where it was just like arena ball, but you could like hit people so hard, like their pads flew off and stuff. I really did like that. And they had sports talk. They had sports talk football before anybody was doing anything like that. That was ahead of its time. I mean,
if I'm not mistaken, didn't Madden originate on the Genesis?
I want to say I do think it was Genesis.
Madden 94, 95.
I played a lot of Madden.
I heard a little thing not too long ago, kind of research leading up to this, that Electronic Arts. So we kind of owe Electronic Arts being here to the Genesis because Nintendo's third-party licensing rules or whatever they had were so strict that EA was like, "F you, we're not gonna play ball with you," and Sega was like, "Come on over here." And EA dropped so many hits on SEGA Genesis. Madden, if I'm not mistaken, was one of them. And they were always the I'll get into some of my favorites, but look, remember the EA carts were always a little taller and they had that yellow tab. And as a kid, I was always trying to take it off because I thought there was some kind of function to it. Like it connected to something and nobody knew what. It turns out it's just a design choice.
Raven's saying that Madden came from Quarterback Club. Now, Quarterback Club was originally on Genesis, so I guess that is true. Okay.
Okay, so he's not too high yet to give us good information. Thank you, Raven. For me, naturally, the Sonic games were on play a lot of the time. Personal favorites. I've always loved Sonic and Knuckles the best, but in recent years, I've kind of gone back and thinking, as much as I love Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, I think, had probably the best soundtrack. And something I've noticed in recent years is that the second track of every 2D Sonic game is not only the best track in the game, it's some of the best tracks in the entire series. Chemical Plant Zone, Marble Garden, Hydro City.
My wife thinks
I
it's
listen
funny
to
that
that
I
shit
find old
religiously.
Nintendo, Super
Flying
Nintendo Genesis
Battery
music
is a personal
entertaining.
favorite.
She doesn't get it. She doesn't like it. And I'm like, it's amazing. What don't you like about it? She's like, it sounds like MIDI files. I'm like, it is. It's amazing.
That's the point.
Yeah. And shout out to Raw Neonzi in the chat. He was the only one who guessed correctly. The music that was in the stream starting soon file that I was playing earlier was the second level of Sonic Spinball, Lava Powerhouse, which is I think a lot of people slept on that particular track. Road Rash was one of my jams. It was it's the only game my dad and I ever played together. He never played any other game, but Road Rash, he'd sit there and play with us for hours. I had a lot of times what went into the decision to buy games was because we only got them, remember, once or twice a year, was usually we get like 1 or 2, sometimes even 3. A lot of what went into the decision was multiplayer because I have a brother who's 7 years younger than me, and this was a family thing. So, had to get stuff. I had Micro Machines. Naturally, I had some Ninja Turtles. No Mortal Kombat or Splatterhouse for me because Mom was wrapped up in the Satanic Panic, and I wasn't even allowed.
Yeah.
I was not allowed no Doom or anything like that. And
hey guys, I gotta head out. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Bryce, thank you for being here, man. Very much appreciated.
Nice meeting you, Bryce.
Nice meeting you, man.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Deuces.
So I had Jungle Strike. I had a lot of an eclectic collection. I had Sparkster and Rocket Knight. My favorites on the system though were the platformers that were unique to the Genesis, not just Sonic, but you can see it right above my head right there. Dynamite Heady had great music and an interesting gameplay. Vector Man was cool. And I always loved Rystar, which was a legit 5-star game, but it came out like literally in the last year that the Genesis was a thing. So it came out way too late to make any kind of impact, and by then everyone was kind of moving on into the new 64-bit era. Saturn was on the horizon. Nintendo 64 was on the horizon. My friend from Facebook, Harrison, nice to see you. He loves Kid Chameleon, and he's going to be screaming at us. I didn't play that. I didn't have that one. I didn't play it.
Never played it.
He made it sound very intimidating, like how much you could play and then get thrown backwards into the game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
before permadeath was a thing.
Yeah, I guess the weird thing with these is like all of the displays look so realistic. You really thought that was what the gameplay was going to look like. It's still 16-bit, but it was so intriguing, it was so attention grabbing compared to Nintendo. When you saw the cover of a Genesis game, especially Kid Chameleon, you're like, oh my god, the graphics for these are going to be sick.
Oh yeah.
Somebody's talking about Vector Man. Shit, you can talk about a game that made me flip some tables, man.
Yeah,
that was hard.
That was another one I never.
It was good, but man, it's difficult. So much that I didn't even play Vector Man 2.
Animan was talking about Contra Hardcore earlier, and I mean that's nightmare levels hard, man.
Not just a clever name; it's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my nerdy ass got that at like 10-something years old, like, wait, hardcore, and then I played it. Oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, God, Raven, man, what? Something about Vector Man's got him incensed. I don't know what the story is there. Yeah, he ain't happy with that.
Tables. It sounds like so much hate.
Raven, have another dab, bro. Chill out, bro. We're here to live in nostalgia. My next question for the panel is: were you 100% Team Genesis, or did you occasionally cross the team lines? Naturally, at the time, this was like the original console war, right? Are you a Nintendo or are you a Genesis kid? Some folks obviously were lucky enough to have both. I was not one. I was kind of forced to choose, even though if I could have had both, I would have. But there were times when, them playground fights would get a little contentious. And by fights, I mean arguments over what was better, Genesis or Super Nintendo. David, Did you were you a line crosser or were you 100% Team Genesis?
I've actually gone back and thanked my parents in my adult life for the fact that they got me both. I've had to
Oh,
yeah.
lucky duck.
So a big brag in my mid 30s, but I was that kid that obviously everybody was going to my house on the street. I had both, so it was just one of those things. I love the Super Nintendo, but I was definitely into the Sega. I just loved all video games, really. So it wasn't. I couldn't find myself if my parents were going to do both, right? Then I wasn't going to pick a side. I was going to just accept all of it. I sound like a spoiled rich kid here, but we weren't. But just lucky enough to have both. So that was me.
What about you, Ego?
Okay, so I will say this. I didn't, and I'll tell you why, because it's like Sega was like the pusher man of video game drugs when I was a junkie, because he opened up his coat and he would say things like, "Hey yo, you like sports? I got that Madden, that Deion Sanders Prime Time 96. You like fantasy? I got Star Trek The Next Generation, Dune, and Double Dragon. You like comic books? I got Comic Zone and Death and Return of Superman. You like movies? I got that Toy Story, Aladdin, Dick Tracy, Cliffhanger, Demolition, and Hook. You want games for the culture? I got Michael Jackson's Moonwalk. I got Power Rangers the movie. I got Terminator. I got Wayne's World, and I got Dragon the Brewster's Story. What you want?" And
Shaq Fu. You didn't mention Shaq Fu.
Oh, for Shaq Fu, I am sorry. Well, Shaq Fu drove me on the edge right there. So you're just like on a Friday night, you're just at the video game store, and you're just doing all this, looking at all the choices you got, and you don't really look at SNES or Nintendo at that point. So I didn't cross over because they had so much. And they really gobbled up the culture. Like SEGA Genesis was the MC Hammer of video games. It was on top. It blew up, and then it burned out bright. Like for that year or two that it was on, it was on. It was, it took over the culture. And it's basically the only gaming system I knew that had a video game that first had to have parental warnings and a sit down with parents. Like I know everyone's talking about 2 Live Crew at this point, talking about parental advisory.
2 Live Crew.
Oh my god!
Yeah, SEGA was the 2 Live Crew.
They were.
They had those actors from Mortal Kombat actually sit down on a newscast to tell them why it wasn't violent. Like it was that much of a hellraiser amongst parents, especially the Christian ones. It's hard to tell somebody what's your character doing. It's like take souls. You're like, oh, that's the devil. So it had so much edge to it. For that reason, I couldn't cross any party lines at that point.
I feel you. I definitely feel you.
What about you, Anime?
In my house, as for me at my house, we were strict adherents to at least for the 16-bit era. We were strict adherents to the church of Sonic and Streets of Rage. But once I left the house, I completely did whatever I want. Like because I'm a kid. Like I don't. Yeah, it's there's loyalty and all that, but at the end of the day, I just want to do cool shit. And when I go over my boy Ant's house, and he's playing Super Metroid, he's flying around shooting aliens and shit, and then they pop in some weird as hell like clay fighters, like that shit was so random and obscure. I'm like, I want that. I go home and I couldn't even dream of telling my parents because they like, we already got you that. I can't tell them I want a Super Nintendo. You know what the answer was? You already got a Nintendo.
Right.
Yeah. we got Nintendo as a house.
Everything for Nintendo. They still do.
But it's super. It's like, what's so super about it? Go down there, have a super time, plug it up. You've been having fun on that since you was 3 years old. What you need a new one for? We just got you to Sega. I know, but Killer Instinct. Okay. You want to see a Killer Instinct? Keep bugging your mama after she just got off work. And they just spent all their money getting you this damn Genesis, talking about a Super Nintendo. That's a Killer Instinct that you about to see right there. So.
I remember being in the arcade when watching somebody who knew how to play Killer Instinct and watching him. I played a match against a guy and he comes up against me. Again, Twitch reflex. Fighting games have always been button mashers for me. I can't play that shit.
Fair.
This motherfucker got me in that corner and just I'm talking was
combo.
juggling me off the screen, and I'm like, well, that was a waste of a quarter.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like child abuse.
I will say the only high that you'll try to chase as an adult is making someone else rage quit, or when you're playing an arcade game and they just leave in the middle of a combo breaker. You're like, I just made this person waste a quarter. It's like, I want to chase this high for the rest of my life. I still haven't found it yet,
There's
but I mean,
nothing better.
There really isn't. I mean, making someone rage quit like at the arcade, especially after you practiced on your Genesis all day for this. Could never beat that.
All right.
Hell yeah.
Justin, aka Agent Zero, welcome to the the Genesis stream, sir.
What's up?
Good.
How is everybody?
Chilling,
Hey, man.
man.
All right, last of the coffee's down.
Oh, I got a nice beer buzz going, so I'm happy.
Uh-oh.
It's It's Friday, man.
Yeah.
Phew.
Oh, yeah.
It's Friday.
Mike, what about you? For your
Well, I've never been an either or guy, and I understand that some people didn't have that option. With me, it's like ever since I was younger, this was one of my first ones where I was like, why do people feel like they got to pick a side? I mean, I still see it in console wars today, like between Microsoft and Sony people all the time. Like, I like, if there's two great things, I like two great things. I mean, I liked Marvel and DC. I liked WCW and WWF. I liked Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and Sylvester Stallone movies. I didn't feel like I had to pick. What's better than one great thing? Two great things.
Exactly.
And for me, I think I really like the Genesis for their sports games, and I like the Super Nintendo for their JRPGs and their first party stuff. Zelda, I've been a Zelda just fanboy since I was old enough to play video games. That's why to this day I still can't walk away from Nintendo. Every time, like, Nintendo, they just don't get it. They just don't get what gamers want. Oh, a new Zelda game. I got to go buy this damn console now. So, yeah, I've never been really able to pick, but I mean, I feel like a lot of people put a lot of disrespect on Genesis because, you know, just like they do like with, NWO, WCW time. It's like, you don't understand. That was really awesome for a long time. And just because they're the ones who came out on the losing side doesn't mean it wasn't great.
Oh, WCW was king, man. Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome. So I've never really understood the whole like pick sides, but I respect it. If people are that loyal to something, that's good. For me, if I'm not getting checks, you don't have my loyalty. I want competition because that makes great products. The consumers win when you're competing. And if there's two great things, I want two great things. I definitely don't feel like I got to be on the winning side. It's dumb to me. I don't doesn't increase my bottom line, you know. So
Right.
You know, the team sports aspect of it, you know, kind of appealed to some kids, to some people. You know, they want to look at it and they want to pick a side. You know, I was very much with a lot of people. Like, if I could have had a Super Nintendo, I probably would have, if for nothing more than just Mario, because Mario World is still my favorite Mario game.
oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
But wasn't able to do that. You know, you're kind of limited when you're 13 years old and you earn $5 a week, and you know, we got a lot more options these days. And these days,
We got
people just make.
options.
I mean, let's be honest, though. I mean, most of the console war stuff when we were kids is most people they either had one or the other, right? So you're gonna try to drum up interest for what you have versus what you don't have. You know.
Now I see people like raging on Twitter because Microsoft bought Bethesda, and these games aren't. Now Sony needs to buy something to keep up, or else they're gonna quit. And I'm like, what? They're gonna quit? Quit what?
That's a good. You're gonna buy their game no matter what system.
Did you work there?
Yeah. I guess because my AJ says he was blessed. Dad collected every system.
Oh yeah, well that's part
Way to go, Dad.
That's great, bro.
Awesome. Justin, we'll catch you up. What went into your decision? Why'd you buy a Sega? And, you know, what were your favorite games for it?
All right, so I guess once I was able to get one, before that, TurboGrafx 16 was what Mom thought was. It had the best value because you could play interchangeably. But when it came to Genesis was what I really wanted, right? It was kind of one of those things. It was like, you know, so she made the buying decision to get the TurboGrafx. So when I turned 12, it was, you know, they had just come out with the second gen Genesis. So it was the square one. That's not the one that's behind your head there, John.
Yeah, this is the mini. This is the mini version they come out with a couple of years ago. I got it mostly for nostalgic purpose, but it's a pretty good collection.
Right, but that form factor, I guess, is what I'm saying. Whether it's small or not, I never had one of those. I had the newer version that didn't have the red.
Yeah, me too. I didn't have this. This was the first version. I had the second version.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, what GamePro, man? Like the magazine, I was completely enthralled, and they had me on the hook. I would beg my mom to buy me GamePros at the local grocery store, and eventually, you know, we spent a lot of time in Toys R Us playing. I played Sonic the Hedgehog on their like constant demo machine that they had, and eventually the stars aligned, and I got it for my birthday. And the first game that I got for it was because she was such a cool mom, was Mortal Kombat 2. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Hell of a first game.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was my first owned game. for sure. But yeah, that what went into the buying decision. It was just I didn't want to be like my step siblings because there's a bit of an age gap, and so my stepbrother, he bought Super Nintendo with his own money because he was I guess at that point an adult, and so he played Super Mario World and this and that. I just want to be different, I guess. So for me, it was I just wanted to be on another team besides everybody that was around me. So and then eventually I stuck with it because I enjoyed the system. But there were so many games on Super Nintendo that I just was not interested in at all. I was Nintendo first, so NES first, the Nintendo Entertainment System. But then once I made the jump over to Genesis, I didn't look back at all.
So sorry, I had to look down at my questions because I don't remember anything because I'm an idiot. So we talk about what we love. Was there anything that y'all kind of was disappointed with? Whether it was a game, a peripheral, or you kind of had buyer's remorse, maybe looking at like, oh, that Mario looks so nice, or something like that. Was there anything about it that y'all, kind of had a kind of disappointment about it, and you can include the peripherals if you want. We can probably dovetail this into the peripheral question if y'all like. Did anybody have the Sega CD or the 32X?
Was not that blessed.
No.
I had both.
Always
blessed.
wanted one. Yeah, always wanted one. Never got one.
I had both, and the Saturn, and the Dreamcast. I went down with
Damn,
that shit, baby.
Now, Dream.
Wow. Rich guy alert over here.
I could talk about some Dreamcast all day, but I know that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
All I got to say about the Dreamcast is fuck that controller, man. Shit
Well,
hurt
You
my
didn't like the
hands.
VMU? Come
But
on.
man,
I loved the controller. I have to fight you on that
It
one. I
was
loved
so
it.
unergonomic to me, and then I go over to PlayStation and I was like, oh, this feels really good to hold.
Yeah.
the
What?
graphics on that thing were way ahead of their time, though. Poor Sega.
Real shit.
Fair.
But
I think
Fair.
if there was any disappointments with me with Sega, it was always just like as soon as they got punched in the mouth, it seemed like they just buckled. It was
did.
like you guys were really kicking ass, and as soon as Nintendo pushed back and maybe took back the lead, I felt like they just we made a good run out of it.
so
So the Dreamcast was doing very successful.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy it. You
But
could
then-
not buy it
Yeah, you
anywhere. They
couldn't
didn't.
get one.
They didn't get it in the damn stores. So I feel like
So
that's
once that
always been their
PlayStation
problem.
2 rolled into town,
So
Yeah,
I have a funny.
juggernaut.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
because Sony's great at marketing. Sega, look, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. It's a marketing genius. That was brilliant. I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
we still talk about it, but I always feel like their marketing always like I'm a marketing minor, so I'm always going to talk about these things. I feel like something they taught us in business school was never ever use your competition's name in your marketing, and Sega could not keep Nintendo's name out of their mouth. They said every time you talk about your competition, all you're doing is giving them power.
You're making them
Nintendo-
relevant.
Nintendo never mentioned
Well,
them. Never mentioned Sega. Every single one of their commercials, it's something about Sonic's better than Mario. Nintendo, it was clever. It was clever, but a lot of people don't like that style of marketing, and I don't think it worked for them. So, but maybe just feel like they gave up too easily, and their marketing.
I think
was never
initially
as
it did.
good as Their competition was.
I think
Sega-
initially it worked for them, but I think they ran it to the ground.
Yeah.
I think Sega had an inferiority complex.
Yeah.
because a lot of people don't remember.
they were trying
I don't-
so hard.
well,
They were trying so hard to make the Saturn be a PlayStation 1, because when PlayStation 1 got revealed and they had all the 3D graphics and everything, they were initially trying to market the Saturn as like the ultimate 16-bit machine, not realizing that 16 bits was getting left in the dust by everyone, and they tried at the 11th hour to dovetail 3D graphics into the Saturn. It just could not handle it.
Well, but
It
but
had a
if you
few
go-
gems, admittedly,
Right.
but it struggled, and it did not have a good library.
But if you go back, okay, I'm saying like from their company's inception. A lot of people may not remember this, but I was an Atari kid, okay, first.
I went to.
And I had Star Trek. And to those who remember, Star Trek was made by Sega. And so they came from that era of making Atari games, just like Nintendo. Nintendo kind of broke out and did their own thing, obviously. And I think they grew a backbone in that process. But for whatever reason, I think Sega carried along that mentality of game, like making game centric kind of thing. And so I think for them, the console was always playing second fiddle to what they were trying to do game wise. That's just my opinion. I think it did kind of go into an inferiority complex. And the graphics processing power just wasn't there on the Genesis, unfortunately. I mean, shoot, they couldn't even do Star Fox or any, or Pilot Wings.
Right.
Yeah.
That was disappointing to me. That's
that was
my
something that got
disappointment.
pointed out recently. Was Nintendo was able to up the ante with their games, with games that were pushing the limit, whereas Sega had to have the add-ons, the 32X
Or
and
Hail Mary with the
CD.
32X was a good idea. It was just like, why, when I can buy Super Nintendo for that same price, why do I got to pay for an add-on? Yeah,
Right.
that's the way we looked at it. Yeah.
Do
Well,
y'all
and they-
remember the hold on, do you remember though
Sure.
the ad for those systems all at once, with the kid looking up and at the camera going, "Mommy, what are those game systems doing?" And the answer was, "They're making a home entertainment system, sweetie." Like, it's
That's
that-
hilarious.
gaming ads of the 90s had no chill. Like they knew who they were appealing to, and they
Beautiful.
leaned into that so hard.
Yeah, but that's what made the Genesis sexy. It was like MTV, it was edgy. It wasn't as safe as
Yes.
Nintendo. Nintendo was Disney and Genesis
Yep.
was MTV, and that's,
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
That's
why
a
it
good
worked a lot.
comparison.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the thing. Like even Sega, they had the games that had blood and this and that. Matter of fact, if I remember right, the Sega, the cheat codes to be able to unlock the blood from being green.
I still remember it.
But I mean that was released first, and then Super Nintendo they eventually leaked it. And then the other thing I remember is with Mortal Kombat 2 specifically, it might have even been Mortal Kombat 1. The color of the blood was was green on Nintendo, and then it was white, which was supposed to look like spit, I guess, on Super Nintendo. And I was
It's supposed to be sweat, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a lot of sweat, man.
There's a lot of sweat when you rip someone's head off.
And I mean, and when you're about that age, like you're starting to learn other things, and you're like, wait, a minute, this looks like something completely
I
different.
know you're
than
hiding
what
something
y'all
from me,
think it
video
is.
game. I know you're hiding something from me.
What kind of game is this?
It's a sweaty game.
Oh man, and Time Killers, man, that thing. When I played that I played that on arcade, and then I saw that Sega actually had it, and it was unedited. Like it didn't have green blood. It was just like we're lopping legs and arms off and stuff. I'm like, I'm here for it. Yes, Eternal Champions. That's another one. Oh my gosh, like this is taking me back for sure.
Eternal I never was good with the fighting games. Eternal Champions was also one I never could really figure out. I feel like fighting games on the Genesis were just a little clunkier than they were on the Nintendo. Like,
Well, I
especially
mean, a lot had to
when
do with the 3-button controller, right?
admittedly,
But I had to buy that. Okay, right there. Favorite peripheral. Okay, so non-disappointment. I'm gonna go the other way. The 6-button. When they came out with that 6-button jazz, man, I was like, dude, I gotta get 2 of those suckers.
I have one.
All my friends that were Street Fighter fans, when they got that 6-button
You had
controller, they
to.
were like, it
That
changed
was
their
it.
life. Yeah.
Because
Auto
pressing start to swap between the different levels of attack that was
auto include.
terrible. Yeah, I love the 3-button controller though. Just to say, like the original 3-button, I love it.
Sonic.
The big buttons, it just feels good to sit there and mash it while Sonic's
Yeah.
peeling out.
Spinning.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, the 6-button was awesome for me. I was like, yo, once I learn how to do high punch and high kick in this, it's over for you hoes. Okay.
Right.
I did want a Sega CD. I ain't gonna lie, and like almost as bad as I wanted a Sega Genesis. And but at the time that Sega CD was like $200 compared to the Genesis was
At that point, I was working and had my own money, and I could justify buying this stuff. It was with the Saturn was where I was so disappointed, where I was like, I was going to walk away. I was not buying a Dreamcast until I saw those sports games and was like, oh my god, yeah. So
Always the sports games.
Sega's
Oh
always
my
known
gosh,
the game
freaking
with sports
NBA
games, but
2K, man, that game, like,
yeah.
I didn't even.
Football,
I
I'm a
didn't
big
even
football guy,
like-
so of course I saw the NFL game. I was like, holy shit, this
And
is
even
real.
ESPN had their game at that point too.
Gosh, it was insane on Dreamcast.
But yeah, the Saturn, it was like, wow, Panzer Dragoon's awesome. What, the system's dead? What happened? I just got it.
exactly.
Exactly.
$100 for this. Yeah.
I
And
did
it
like
and it
Panzer
lost the
Dragoon.
source code too. So
Yeah. And we never got a stateside release of Shining Force 3 either. Dadgummit. It's like
Yeah. Now I wanted the Sega CD so bad, but my dad actually, funny story or whatever. I know we all remember renting games, but renting a system was even more
Oh
like
yeah,
involved.
yeah.
I can just remember my dad coming home one weekend from the local store, and he had rented the Sega CD, and I had that, and it was a WWF Steel Cage on Sega CD, and
Nice.
that was the bomb, man.
Heck yeah.
That was a great weekend, but
I got
having to
it just
give it
for
back
Echo.
was very hard. Like
So
packing it back up.
So speaking about a weekend, like my mom would pick me up every other weekend to visit with her, and she went by the local Blockbuster, and I remember picking up Shining Force, and I'm like, what is this? Right? I had no context. I don't even think I saw it in GamePro yet. Maybe I did, but I looked at the box art, and I'm like, I'm gonna take this, and we'll try this out on a Friday night. I got no sleep. Like that was
Yeah.
my first. Like I played that thing straight through. That was almost like early Evercrack vibes. Like that was me just sitting down.
EverQuest? My man.
EverQuest.
Not ever crack.
Man.
Yes.
That's what I say,
But I'm just saying.
Evercrack.
I'm just saying.
Evercrack. I remember
I saw my
that.
roommate
But-
lose his job
but-
over EverQuest, and that taught me a valuable
Hey.
lesson to not get into those kinds of games.
And see, I was in the stress test beta for World of Warcraft, but I completely, I'm completely, complete diversion there. But yeah, no. Seriously though, I did not sleep that weekend. I remember distinctly, like it was. I had to keep playing Shining Force. Like I love that game. Love it. Can't live without it.
Unfortunately, Robert says he's not going to be able to make it. At the last second, I was talking to him yesterday. He had a kid function that he forgot about, and when he mentioned the stream, the wife was giving him the stink eye. So we all know, how it
Yeah.
is.
Pour one out.
Yeah, right.
The life of older married gamers and streamers. Did not ever have a Sega Saturn or come close to owning one, and the desire to own one only lasted as long as I was playing Panzer Dragon at a demo station in either Walmart or the mall. I can't remember. And that was fun. And then I tried playing Nights into Dreams. And I don't know about anyone else. I had a bit of a difficult transition going from 2D gaming to 3D gaming, wherein I had trouble at times, especially on the PlayStation or the Saturn, telling what was what, kind of where backgrounds, foregrounds were, because I was so used to 2D. The environments, I was in Nights, I was like flying into the ground, going up. I was like, this is really discombobulating to me.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite PlayStation games was Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 2. And there are times I'm just running around going like, is that a door I can interact with, or is that just shit on the wall?
Yeah,
I had that problem.
Didn't help that those type of graphics were still very much in their infancy. So a lot of times the background just was the foreground. And I mean, they tried to separate it, but like trying to tell the difference between the two, like it's not like now where like you freaking Skyrim and everything. So yeah.
I think the N64 generation chased me off of the 3D transition for a long time, to where I was like, I don't quit. Like Donkey Kong 64, Castlevania 64 was like, oh,
Those are hard.
stop it, please stop, put it back on 2D.
Some games are
can't
just
talk about
better
that.
in 2D, and Castlevania was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
But Mario 64, like just getting used to the like that, like I was able to tell what was what, at least, because that was very simplistic for my stupid mind. And but when I first played, this is funny. When I first played a Nintendo 64 controller, I did not see anyone else play with the controller. I was holding it on the outside with my thumb, trying to break out of the socket to
You want to
use
talk
the.
about worst controllers?
Man.
I would take the
I'm like-
Dreamcast controller 100 times.
Oh
over
yeah,
the N64
absolutely.
controller.
Yeah.
N64
I mean, the
is the
Dreamcast
worst- it's
controller
the
was
worst
functional.
controller.
It was just uncomfortable for me.
The N64 controller is the worst one, undoubtedly.
It is. It is.
I don't.
I mean,
What
come on.
until I
That,
saw,
that,
like,
that middle grip felt like you're holding a penis. Like, come on.
My wife calls it the dildo controller.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So I had one of those weird. I had a weird one-hand controller that you could play. It was almost like a power glove, and they made this. It was a one-handed Nintendo 64 controller. It was really strange. I don't know. It did. I don't know. But yeah, I loved it, man. GoldenEye, man, that's my jam.
Oh yeah.
I played
And,
some of that last week with my
Shadows.
kids.
Yeah, Shadows of the Empire too, man. That's a must. That's an auto include.
Am I the only one here who had the Sega channel?
No, my cousin had it,
that?
and it was the coolest thing.
It was cool because I remember at the time you couldn't get Golden Axe 3 on cartridge. You could only get on Sega channel. And the
Really?
games changed every month. So
It was
we
wild.
played Golden Axe 3 like crazy, and then it was gone. And we were like just so upset that you couldn't
That
get
was
it physically.
way ahead of its time, man.
Yeah,
Like, incredible.
It was like
incredible.
It was Game Pass
Right.
before we even could have fathomed something like that.
That's
Amazing.
awesome.
And like the Sega Nomad, it was the Switch before the Switch is what it is now, right? Like,
I never got one of those, and I
well,
wanted one for a
Man,
while.
I got
but-
one. I sold it. I wish I'd have kept that thing.
oh
I
man,
love
the
that
Nomad
thing.
is badass.
And just like right there, the TurboGrafx 16, like that thing. If you guys know anything about TurboGrafx, did you see it
one of
ever?
one.
NEC. Well, so I mean that had you had you could take it on the go and you use the same games. I mean it was a Switch before its time, but the unfortunate thing was that thing was so expensive. Then they did the Turbo CD. I wanted all that stuff, never could get it, but at the same time I was too busy. By that point I was too busy spending money on Pokemon games for Game Boy because
Fair.
and getting older.
That's right. I remember at one point I wanted the Atari Jaguar, so don't feel bad.
No, hey, or the Lynx. Remember the Lynx?
Oh, the Lynx,
The
yeah.
Atari Lynx. Yeah.
And all them cat systems, man, I can't even talk about them.
After the
Panasonic-
Saturn, I
the-
learned my
was
lesson. I was
it,
like, look, I'm waiting
yeah.
from now on to see how a system does.
Panasonic 3DO or 3Do, however you want to say it.
I mean-
Philips CDI. I can
I had a
go
Philips
on.
CDI. I think it was horrible.
That's why I didn't buy the
Oh.
PlayStation when it first came out. Yeah.
See, all these things were so expensive. Like they were out of my range. Like I didn't even pay attention to a lot of them because I'm busy with my Genesis. Like oh here, and I would read the game magazines and they would talk about all these other systems. It's like I don't see them in the store.
Right.
None of my friends have
You
one.
don't
Nobody I
nobody
know
have one.
talks about them.
You
so
had
they're-
to go to
they're-
like a Campos, or anybody remembers Campos? I don't know.
Nope.
If yeah, it basically like a Circuit City is the only place you could get a Philips CDI. That was not going to be in a regular like
Well,
EB Games or whatever. Not that I ever saw.
yeah, we had one in Service Merchandise, which was this, catalog store.
Right,
kinda
it's these
place.
big industrial warehouses, right?
See,
And I can remember, and I know this is a diversion too, but I can remember
Yeah.
walking through this store and seeing Zelda: The Wand of Gamelon,
Yep.
and being like, Dad,
dumb.
Oh,
Dad,
Me being a Zelda
please,
guy, I was tempted. Then
I was
actually saw
dying for it, dude. I
my
was like,
boy.
Dad, please get this, man. And of course, the game was like $95 though, right?
Jesus
at this store,
Christ.
So they said there was no way they were going to get it for me, and of course,
Watch those angry
thankfully
video
they
game nerd
didn't.
episodes on those Zelda games, and you will.
Yeah, thank
laugh.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mike. I was just about to say, I don't know if it was because of my region where I was at, or like, I mean, just to be frank, I was like hood adjacent, so like no one even knew what the hell a Phillips Phillips head screwdriver. What are you talking about? I didn't learn that till I was in freaking college watching Angry Video Game Nerd because like no one, we're still on Genesis, Super Nintendo, N64. You hear someone talking about a Philips CDI, you like, what, a computer? What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
It basically was, man. Anyway, I don't want to turn this into the Philips CDI stream, but yeah.
There's not much left to stream. It came and it went. It was too expensive and it
That thing
kinda sucked.
sucked. It sucked.
I can see someone's asking for not reading. I am reading the chat, but I didn't want to take too much time away from too much time away from my guest. If you guys got questions in the chat you want to ask, we'll go ahead and answer them because I've kind of exhausted through the questions that I had. I'm gonna
Did you want to
go.
hit the unappreciated gem joint one time?
Oh yeah.
Good.
I did forget about that. Well, my question is, did you have an underappreciated gem that you just loved on the Sega and it felt like nobody else loved it but you?
So if I'm going first,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
that
back.
was me. I showed the Ronald McDonald game earlier. I put that in multiple answers on the questions, dude. Y'all are laughing, dude. Y'all are laughing, but if you've never played it, you've got to play it. Like it is a killer game, dude, and it's easy, it's fun. It kind of reminds me of like a Kirby game with the difficulty. Like it's not hard by no means, but it's a blast. And you'll see like Grimace, Hamburglar, everybody makes an appearance, dude. It's a 90s kid blast
What's
from the
it
past
called?
there.
What's it called? Just Ronald McDonald?
It's called Ronald McDonald Treasure Land. Now this is Treasure Land.
I gotta look this thing up because
It
I'm
sounds like when
definitely.
Atari
I
let
got
everybody else make
man.
games and
Oh, I
Alpo
love
Dog
it.
Food made an
that's
Atari
so
game.
cool.
Treasure Land
Yeah.
Adventure.
It's just the way.
It's made by it's made by Treasure actually, Justin. It's made by the same people that did Gunstar Heroes. So
Okay.
it's a great game, and it's
Yeah, I'll have to
it's
check
definitely
that
one I recommend highly.
Yeah, because
So
I got it on Steam and it's so much fun playing those old Genesis games with the Xbox One controller.
oh dude, yeah. So and like
Sweet.
I just bought last year. It hasn't come in yet, but I bought a Mega SG. If anybody knows what the Mega SG is.
Name sounds familiar. Can't
So
bring them out of the list.
it's essentially it's a clone console, but it's remade. So you're not playing. It's not like one of those Retrons or whatever. It's actually playing off the actual hardware.
Nice.
But it's able to do it in 1080p. So
Heck yeah.
Oh damn.
yeah. So I'm waiting for that to come in and cannot wait. The first game that's going in there is Ronald McDonald. So,
Love it. I love it.
I love it,
I'll
man.
watch
so
like
cool.
a gameplay of Ronald McDonald on Genesis when I get off this call.
Right.
I'm telling you, you're gonna be
I gotta
fiending
try
for
that.
it too.
I gotta
Hopefully they've
try
got a
it.
no commentary stream and I can just take all this in.
Seriously.
You laugh because people used to laugh at me when I used to say that about Castle of Illusion, like, "Oh yeah, go play your Mickey Mouse game." And I'm like,
Oh, I know, dude.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mickey, Castle of Illusion, World of Illusion. Who does? I mean, I love that one. That one's the 2-player one with Donald. I love that game. That is one of my
And
favorite
these are the same
Genesis
people
games too.
when Kingdom Hearts came out. They loved that. And I was like, "Oh, so it's not funny."
Right.
anymore?
Boy.
Right now, Donald Duck is cool, right?
Yeah.
Because
Don't get me
he's
started
hanging
on
out with
Kingdom
Sephiroth now.
Hearts.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Kingdom Hearts.
Oh yeah, we'll be that's a whole stream on its own.
What about you, Hiko?
So underrated game. I mean, I really. I look for it again on here.
Or did you
I
have
think I
all
really-
the hits? It was just the greatest
I
hits.
wish. I wish. No, I really liked Comic Zone just because it, on paper,
So
it
good.
made the most sense as a game. It just was hard to
hard.
play
It's
because you could flip the panels, go backwards, go forwards,
It was
go up,
really
go back down. They were trying to use the panels to the best of their abilities. It was just a lot to do, and for that reason, it's just like you either got bored with it too quickly or you got frustrated and you didn't want to play anymore. But I wish that there were some games that kind of went back to that form because I believe that there was something there that they could have capitalized on, but just kind of gave up on it.
It was hard, but I loved it. At the time, I was
They
still
were-
a big
yeah.
going to the comic
It
book
is
shop
very
and buying Spider-Man. Before Dan Slott ruined Spider-Man, I still bought Spider-Man every single month.
Right.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
So
it
Comic
was
Zone was like
great.
everything that a big comic book dork like
Yeah.
me was all about. But good God, the difficulty.
It is.
Yeah.
I've been
It's such
trying
a
to play
great
it now, and it's
concept too,
hard.
and it really worked the way they
Yeah.
implemented it. But it just, again, Twitch reflex. Hard games are harder for me than a lot of other people. I'm not going to ask
Tricking
somebody
enemies
to.
do the pages and stuff. So neat.
That
I
was
love it.
cool. Being able to punch through them. That was cool. Never
Yeah.
beat it. I don't even think I got to the second or third levels. I didn't own it though. I played it at friend's house.
That was a Sega Channel one for me. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I got it now on Steam, and it is every bit as hard now as it ever was, and I feel like it's a personal challenge. I really need.
Yeah,
to
like I'm a
push
better
through.
gamer now. I
I
can be.
gotta
No, it's
push
still
through,
hard.
dadgummit.
Justin, did you have any underappreciated
Yes.
gems?
Yes, and you guys can laugh at me too. I don't care. But I guess I could say two, but like one is probably going to be it's Fantastic Dizzy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a
I don't know.
Codemasters game. That game.
I think I played the Nintendo one of those Nintendo versions of that
Oh,
game, and never
Is that
got
the
any.
egg?
The little
Yes.
egg that's.
Yes. Yes.
I
love
never
it.
got anywhere with that game.
I liked that game because it was chill and the music was just like the music was on point. It was just as you're playing the game, it was almost like the very first Minecraft experience for me. It's just relaxing to play a game. It's not high pressure. Yeah, you can get damaged or whatnot. Of course, if you don't take out the enemies like you should, but it just felt a lot more just laid back. But my other, if I can say there's another would be Cyborg Justice, and that was on the other side. It was more intense for sure. And I don't know if y'all ever heard of Cyborg Justice.
Looking it up
Nah,
now.
you got me, man.
Doesn't ring a bell.
It's either
Unfortunately,
Cyborg Justice or Robot Justice. I'm trying to remember what it is.
Cyborg
but
Justice, yeah. No, I'm
Cyborg
looking
Justice.
it up right now, actually. Yeah, Dizzy gave me like Kirby vibes too. Like I just, just that kind of like chill gameplay. Yeah, that was cool.
I thought I'd heard of everything, but Ronald McDonald and now fantastic Dizzy. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dizzy
and,
was on that Aladdin deck enhancer thing too. I remember seeing that with the AVGN. Yeah, there's some funny games with Dizzy.
Well, Aladdin. I mean, I can't say Aladdin because everybody loved Aladdin.
oh yeah, it was
But
very
that
well
was-
known.
Yeah.
That one I did have because I love that movie.
Yeah, me
Right.
too. It's my favorite Disney movie. Seconded only by Beauty and the Beast. I don't care.
Goofy
That's
movie.
fair.
Goofy
my
movie.
favorite.
Goofy
That's-
movie.
Goof Troop.
I'm still waiting for that
Did you
full
say
Power
Goofy
Line album.
movie, Alan?
Huh?
John A. Douglas, whatever. Did you say Goofy movie?
Did I see it? Man, I love that movie. I'm still waiting for Powerline's full album to drop all these years later.
That's our best friends moment we just had because I
Yeah.
love
Hell
Goofy
yeah.
movie.
That
then
was an
there's-
underappreciated gem at the time too. Like, it kind of went under the radar. It wasn't part of the big Renaissance, lineup with princesses and everything. It was just a continuation of Goof Troop. But it was like, what's interesting is it hits now differently when you have kids than it did
Right.
back then. Back
Right.
then you were kind of on Max's side. Now you're kind of on Goofy's side. It's,
I'm over here
it's
wiping
awesome.
my eyes watching it with my son, dude. I'm just like,
It's like reading
oh
a
my
Stephen
God.
King book when you're a teenager and then reading it as an adult. You get something completely different out of it.
Yeah.
But I got to throw one more in, Skitchin. That one, if y'all never played Skitchin, you got to play it. It is
Yo, Skitchin was awesome.
Skitchin, man.
Yeah.
Man, what the
Yeah.
Love that game.
man? Oh, you forget. I sometimes, maybe it's just me, but sometimes I forget how big and just how wide the library of games was for Genesis. Because like we're sitting here, we're all talking about bangers, and y'all throwing out Skitchin and Ronald McDonald games where the cover looked like one of them like Russian knockoff Disney movie covers from VHS or some shit. I mean, I ain't hating on you for like. I will sit there and go. I used to play like make kids on NES.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
like
even
that.
Talk shit,
Yeah.
It's like that, yeah.
But
Well,
it's just so much stuff.
The disappointment for me though was no Star Wars license, so we never got a Genesis Star Wars game. So that is, I'm just gonna say that is a
That's
disappointment.
Because the Super Nintendo Star Wars games were excellent. So, yeah.
They're hard though, and I mean,
They're
they're
hard
very
as
hard
hell.
games on
I
Genesis.
never got a
Jesus,
chance to play them.
They're hard as hell. It's like not fun hard either. Like, and Mike,
about-
you brought this up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna get to anime. And, do you have any underappreciated gems? And I don't know that Sparkster and Rocket Knight count as underappreciated because they were about what, middle of the pack, weren't they?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little above cult classic because like it obviously didn't catch on the way Sonic did, and I think although I love Sparkster's more edgier design in his second game onward, I feel like that started to creep too close into like the Sonic 90 edginess sort of thing because
Yeah.
Sparkster in Rocket Knight Adventures, he had a more cutesy roundish design, and even the way he looks on the North American cover versus the Japanese original cover is like night and day. Like he looked like a little Disney character on one, and the second one is like, oh no, this little opossum about to murder the hell out of these pigs. Okay, but for pure underrated gems, I don't know how underrated it was, but I didn't hear a whole lot of people back in the day talk about there was a specific Simpsons game, and it was the one where you were Bart, and it was like the background would like change into like paper or like imagination stuff. It's hard to describe, but I just thought about it right now because I know there was a Bart versus like the Space Mutants, and then there was another one where you
jumping over the
It's
paper
hard.
you're talking about.
say it again.
Where you have to like jump over his homework. It's like
Yes.
you're walking down the street and it's
Mhm.
just paper. It's just wild, yeah, and like bubble gums flying through the street and stuff. Yeah,
Yes, it was so random, and then you'd have like a random stage where you were like
game is
Godzilla or
also
some shit.
hard as hell. Like
It was like I beat
we just-
Space Bart versus Space Mutants. I
Like-
could not beat this other one, mostly because I didn't know what the fuck was happening.
it's. I will tell you that I just recently watched a live stream of that of somebody beating the game and like explaining how you actually progress through it. I don't understand how anyone would ever know this until they're like, an adult. Like,
Yeah, I gotta
you know,
watch this because to this
it's-
day I can't tell you what the fuck happened.
it's wild, man. Yeah.
I don't know, I think Bart versus the Space Mutants on NES drove me away from any Simpsons game for the rest, except for the arcade game, which was excellent. But after that, it was like I don't.
Valid, because
No more Simpsons games.
Oh god, that game made me so mad.
I wouldn't call it an underappreciated gem. I can't go through this whole stream without mentioning Ultra Beast just because I played it with my kids now, and all the time I walk around the house going, "Oh!"
Hey, yo, John, I don't mean to interrupt you, but dude, you're actually at 600 subs as
I was waiting for a spot to come in and say that. Thank you all very much.
Awesome.
Let's go.
I am humbled and appreciated as well as handsome. So thank you all very, very much. I think the 600th person was Stephen Ransom to come in. Angry Canadian.
Nice.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you all so much. It is very much appreciated. Again, I'm very humbled that anybody gives me a chance to try and entertain them or be informative or anything. Mike, what about you? Any underappreciated gems that you had?
I got two. First is one called Flashback: The Quest for Identity. And I feel like people either know it and love it, or they have no idea what I'm talking about. It was one of those games that was just like kind of really cinematic, but it had really cool gameplay and a cool story and stuff like that. It was just ahead of its time. You go back and play it now, it's probably kind of rough, but at the time it was like very cool. But for me, it sounds weird to say Phantasy Star game because people love the Phantasy Star games. But people love Phantasy Star 2 and they love Phantasy Star 4. No one I knew seemed to like Phantasy Star 3 because it was different. It tried to do something a little different. And what I loved about it is this is something that BioWare popularized, where decisions that you make changes down the rest of the game. So it had branching storylines in that game where you could basically marry off different generations, and the decisions you made in that first generation affected how you got next. So I think you had several different timelines and 4 different major endings. So the replayability was through the roof. And it was already like a 200-hour RPG. So I always really appreciated that one. And just a banger of a soundtrack. It's just so good. Like, you would go on YouTube right now and there's people that cover the soundtrack on their guitars because of how good that soundtrack is. But yeah, Phantasy Star 3 to me is just so underrated because it was just different. And it came it's sandwiched between 2 legendary games. I'll say Phantasy Star 4 is obviously probably the best in the series. It's one of the best games on Genesis, I think. But 3 is always going to be a soft spot in my heart because everybody just kind of trashes it.
Was 1 on Master System?
Yeah, okay. Which I did have the Master System. We got that much later, like when someone didn't want it anymore, they gave it to us, and I played Space Harrier like nonstop. Yeah,
nice.
See, I would consider the Phantasy Star games at the time like an obscure game. Like I just felt like the Phantasy Star as a whole, as a series, fell to the wayside during when Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger and. I mean,
the whole JRPG genre at that point was kind of underappreciated.
Exploded. Phantasy Star 3 just got buried because I think Chrono Trigger came out like the same week or some shit. It was some huge game by Squaresoft just completely buried it. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Unfortunate, and I would not have known what to do with it. I took several years because I had a buddy named Chuck. Me and him were good friends, best friends during my later teenage years. He was the one who kind of got me not just into fantasy, kept pushing the Crystal Shard at me. He's like, dude, you got to read this. It's great. He kept pushing these JRPGs and he's like, right, you got to. He showed me the end of the final boss fight of Final Fantasy 3 for the Super Nintendo, which is 6, so obviously. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there watching him play, and I'm like, how do you process all this? How the fuck are you even playing this? What is this? I could not get it. Just like today, I kind of don't get like card games like Magic the Gathering. That just something in the head didn't click when it came to JRPGs, and forced me, believe it or not, my first JRPG was not Final Fantasy. It was Saga Frontier, which is a really, you want to talk about underappreciated gems.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I call it a gem. I just call it underappreciated or even moderately appreciated. It's not their biggest hit, but it came out before Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation, so it kind of took up that RPG space a little bit, and then Final Fantasy VII came up and took it out. And it's got an addictive battle system, but I'm sitting there trying to figure this shit out on the go. He's directing me, and like once I figured that out, I started dovetailing into the JRPGs on the PlayStation 1, and there's a lot I have yet to go back and play from that era. Ask Judas Jones right here. How often do I play Chrono Trigger? How often do you give me shit for how often I play Chrono Trigger?
I love it. Yeah.
I play Chrono
I want
Trigger.
to say that I really was the one that pushed you to start getting on Chrono Trigger, though, correct?
Yes. And
Okay.
I played Chrono Trigger, and then I played it again the next year when it came up on my Facebook memories, and then
He loves it now.
again. I played it again the next year after that. I played Chrono Trigger once a year.
Yeah. That's me with Super Metroid. I think I play through that one about once a year. I think we all have those games.
I like a good Metroidvania game now, especially when I got through Symphony of the Night is still one of my all-time favorites. Like that whole soundtrack is amazing, that whole game. And I went through that game blind. I had to discover the Upside Down Castle by myself.
Oh, yeah.
That was the best
I have
way
that
to
on the Xbox Arcade still. So every new Xbox console I get, it just follows me. That purchase I made like a decade ago.
It's such a gem, and I was playing that game at like midnight as a teen. You know, these grody ass bosses coming up, and I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to go pray after I played it. But I was not Super Metroid. That's a series that I could. I just didn't bother to go back and play. But the JRPGs, I got into them after their heyday on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, the 90s, I was all about turn-based RPGs, and even on Genesis, I played Wise 3. That was a great game. So anything that I had that was a turn-based RPG, I was going back and playing. I even went back and played some of them on the Master System, some on the NES. I got into Dragon Warrior much later than everyone else and stuff. So that was just such a great time for turn-based RPGs. And I think me, you, and God, what's his name? We're talking about it on Twitter the other day about what was that the Lost Odyssey. It was like the last great turn-based RPG I think that there was. But yeah, you think about this time period. Yeah. This is when it first started blowing up in America, the JRPG. And yeah, it was a great time. Great time.
YouTuber Razorfist has said, and I kind of couldn't see things the way he did. He said before that Chrono Trigger was not big at the time it came out. Like in stores where you could rent video games, there was like, he'd say like there's one copy of Chrono Trigger and it always stayed there. No one ever checked it out. And compared to years later, then when ROMs kind of hit on PC gaming and that kind of whole scene kind of took over, then people were going back and rediscovering when they missed it the first time. And there might be some truth to that, because honestly, I don't remember at that time people's big praise for the JRPGs. It was there, and the people that liked it, but it's the same thing with Phantasy Star. I don't remember many people even talking about. I saw the games,
right?
But I didn't know what they were, and even if I'd gotten them, the turn-based system that they had at the time would have just confused the shit out of me.
RPG, that was kind of a niche thing, like fantasy book readers. It's like, it seems like if you're in that community, it seems like it's big, but outside of that circle, it's like not really. So, I mean, anything that said Squaresoft at that time after Final Fantasy 3, I was like, Secret of Mana, Breath of Fire, anything that came out, and of course Chrono Trigger, because they were like, all the gaming mags were like, Chrono Trigger is even better than Final Fantasy 3. I was like, oh, bullshit. And I was like, wow, holy shit, how'd they do that? So with me, I was automatic at that time. And then the PS1 era started with the Final Fantasy 7, Xenogears, all the stuff that I was like fully into. So that's just such a great era if you were into that. And Genesis, they had some good ones.
They did that, but I put that on my disappointment was just a kind of a lack of JRPGs. I mean, I know they were there, but but they didn't. To me, I know, and I've never gone back and played Phantasy Star 4. I know it's a well-respected game and everything, and I'd like to, but I don't feel like there's anything as iconic as like Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, or Final Fantasy 3 on.
I remember seeing Phantasy Star 4 in a game, Electronics Boutique. Like, it was right when Genesis was dying. And it was on the shelf for $119. And when this was in like 1992, because they made like 3,000 copies of it worldwide or something. It was like, this is an amazing game. But it's like Streets of Rage 3. You couldn't really find it anywhere because the system was pretty much out the door.
Yeah, so good, man.
Man, I missed that one completely. Like, I knew it existed eventually, but like I had like no real connection to it. Unfortunately, that was one of the ones that kind of flew over my radar.
We got that Genesis collection on the Switch for the kids, and we still play Streets of Rage 2. They think it's funny. You can get on skates and get on someone's back and just
Skates was my dude. Insta-lock Skates was
cool.
Skate was great. So I just got my kids for Christmas. I just got them the Genesis Mini 2. So they already had the first Genesis Mini, and I got them the second one that they came out with, and the second one they came out with has Streets of Rage 3 on it, and it also has another game called Crusader of Senti. If anybody knows that game at all, it's very, very, very. This game's probably $5,000 on eBay right now if you look it up.
What?
It's a very obscure game on Genesis. They put it on the Mini too. It's essentially Sega Genesis's version of Link to the Past.
Oh, okay.
To give you an idea of it, it is awesome.
Well,
I can't. That's literally why I bought the system. Well, other than the joy of my children, but
I didn't. My one underappreciated gem, and I don't know. This was even more niche of a niche. Was one that I rented a lot for a while. Was the original? It was called Doom 2 at the time. And it was probably one of the first strategy RPGs. Is that what they're called now? The strat RPGs, kind of dovetailed into like StarCraft and, games of that nature. And that was such an interesting game. I bought it because I had started watching like the Dune movie. It actually aired on Disney Channel, the 1984 Dune movie. That was how I became a fan of the series.
So they showed Dune on Disney Channel?
I shit you not. It was on Disney Channel.
How about that?
And it was the version with like the 10-minute lore dump intro.
David
And
Lynch.
so then I saw the game like, Dune, is this the same one as the movie? And I played it, and it's just the strategy RPG. And the AIs weren't very advanced because like what would happen is after a little while of playing, the AI would just give up. It would just stop sending units to attack you. And eventually you would just unblock the entire map. And I really got into that kind of method of gameplay, and I ended up playing like StarCraft and Doom 2000.
More pylons.
Yeah, must construct additional pylons. Fuck you, no, I don't. I've got like 20 of them. Hold up. I got to bring the stream to a small stop because those of you who are not aware, Animane's aware of this. My good friend is here. Everyone's favorite problematic cactus and corner dweller. Arno, how are you, sir? Forgive me for being late, friends. My dad dragged my ass to Men's Warehouse to get me fitted for my aunt's anniversary party. That's no excuse, Arno. You should have been here. You're getting put in the corner for being late.
Get your ass in there instantly.
Last process your ass to the corner, buddy.
Yes,
yeah.
Arno's always in my check, causing troubles, and then he goes and does the same thing elsewhere. I'm gonna take it to the chat a little bit. If anyone's got questions in the chat, go ahead and ask them. We've got a lot of friends. Too many to get to everybody. Unfortunately,
y'all are completely.
I will say
that is beautiful.
I was gonna say that one of the first questions someone asked was, I think it was Anger Canadian. He was asking about regional locks or regional controls.
I didn't know nothing about that shit.
Okay, I'm about to ask. I was like, "What the fuck is that?" He's like, he get around for Nintendo, but I don't
know there was stuff like that. But like, all I knew is I bought the Genesis and I buy the games that are near the store near me. Like, I don't know. I know there were some games that were like Japan exclusive. A couple of them were in the intro, but man, I didn't have any idea about any of that.
Certainly wasn't importing games at 10 years old.
Right.
I was not a mastermind. Yeah.
That would have been like the niche of the that would have been like what was it? Now the hipster kid, early hipsters like, what? You didn't import the Japan exclusive Genesis cart on your region unlocked Genesis? Like,
I remember that guy. I didn't encounter him until the PlayStation era, but like when they started importing like all the Dragon Ball games, and we got like Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, and it was like, you peons, I have the original Dragon Ball Final Bout with all the original blah 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 blah, and you need this thing, and you have to go to this one store that's like 70 miles away, and you have to say this code to them 5 minutes before they close, and then they reach behind the wall and do all this shit to get you. I'm like, man, fuck out of here.
I had a friend who got Final Fantasy V because it wasn't available in the States for the longest time, and he got a ROM of it translated, and that's when I first learned about ROM gaming. I was like, "That's amazing!" And that's when I said, "I got to get a nice computer."
Bouncing Boredom just put a great question in the chat. I don't know if that's if we want to put it up on the screen or whatever, but
let me see. Let's see.
He's asking about favorite soundtracks.
Soundtracks. Oh wow, it's just
Fantasy Star
3. I just think the Genesis music is so good.
It emulated a hard rock style, right?
Right.
That the Super Nintendo didn't have easily. My track it was in the intro, guys. You know, I already listed my favorite Sonic tracks. When you play Road Rash 2, one of the go to the level Vermont. That was a remake of it in the intro for this stream by composer Dean Harris. He's done remakes of the entire Road Rash series, and they're really cool. Give him a follow. I'll have his info in the descriptions. All y'all's info is in the description for the stream, by the way. So
Golden Axe had really good soundtracks too. It had like the heavy drums and like a sitar and shit. It was wild.
yeah,
wild.
it was. That was my personal favorite. Those Road Rash tracks live in my head rent free to this day. I love those games because the concept was just so great, and I hate that it's fallen on the wayside. And every time they'll be like, "Oh, we've got one in development for a few years," and then the funding for it's cut, or the studio gets killed, or something like that. It just fucking pisses me off. I want another Road Rash game. God damn it! Excuse me.
Splatterhouse had good music too.
Splatterhouse.
Streets of Rage 2, the whole soundtrack is
Oh
banger.
yeah,
Oh,
no
literally played without skips.
Let me tell you about a game that's got great music. Have you ever heard of Ronald? No. So anyway, I don't know what it is, guys, but I just love. It's maybe the most nostalgic sound on the Genesis for me. It's the stage clear tune that plays when you beat a level on Sonic. I think that is I just love that. Yes, God, I love that. Like that I could just hear that on loop, you know.
And
But,
Sega, that's like the most iconic
Yeah.
opening
Oh, yeah,
of any console
absolutely.
ever.
or even the scream from their advertising. The scream.
That's a good market.
Well, so here's a deep cut. I don't know, and I'm probably butchering it, but Chakon the Forever Man or Shakin. Ringing any bells?
Drawing a blank here, man.
Got me, bud.
CHAKAN, and the guy looks. He's basically. Oh man, that game is so metal, and the soundtrack is metal too, and it rocks.
I'm about to look that up.
I don't ever remember seeing that. I will say, guys, look, do not sleep on both Dynamite Heady or Rystar. Their soundtracks were wonderful, and I mean, they're the kind that will get in your head and stay there for a while.
Toe Jam and Earl.
I remember
the
Toe
only
Jam and
thing
Earl.
that
I
was
did
good
not
about
have it
that
or
game.
play it.
The music was probably the only thing good about that game.
Right.
How the hell do you play this stupid thing?
I was gonna say, man, like everyone seems to revere Toe Jam and Earl on the Genesis. I rented it multiple times. Could never. It's one of those where the hell do I go games.
Yeah.
Like I never could figure it out.
So Comic Zone, I think it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sega,
That was good.
You know, with the Elvis impersonator.
Right. For me, I mean, we already mentioned Streets of Rage 2. It's literally unskippable if we're like comparing it to like an album. But like,
Oh, absolutely.
anything Konami made, I don't know what it is about the way they specifically do their music, but it had such a distinct sound from the 8 and 16-bit era that like Sparkster obviously, but Contra Hardcore, I could listen to that anytime. The fact that, first of all, whoever in Japan decided to name the track for the final boss, they named it Last Springsteen. I said, nope, I'm never not listening to this music again because they named it Last Springsteen because the boss Bruce Springsteen, and don't mind me, I'm stupid and a nerd, but that's
Streets of Rage 2 had that level where you're in the baseball diamond and it goes down underground. There's a sound the song right there is just oh my god. That was really back when you found out the games had like sound tests and you could just play the soundtracks. I used to do that, just put those on while I got ready for school and shit. Mom thought I was such a dork.
Would be up till 1 o'clock. Jermaine, you still up there playing them games? Yes, Mom. I'm just listening to the music. Turn that down. We got school tomorrow. Okay,
like,
can I listen to this just a little bit?
I would sit there and listen to the effects, like on Streets of Rage. You can go sit there and listen to the different screams and stuff. I loved that. When's the last time that was in a game?
Oh man, can't even think.
The Road Rash games had really good tracks too. Those were ones that stuck in your head too. And then you have games like Jungle Strike and Desert Strike. I had Desert Strike, There's no music in that. All you hear is
Right.
all day, just sound effects. The game, and it was. I don't know.
I think Chemical Plant Zone though is the best song on the Genesis. That's just like I
it's
could
a
listen
contender.
to it like it's a real song, you know.
I mean, Casino Zone was good too.
I'll dovetail that. Favorite, what's y'all's favorite Sonic game? Because obviously we all
Sonic 2.
2 or Knuckles. I don't know.
Give me 3.
2.
And no cheating and saying Sonic 3 and Knuckles, okay?
Yeah.
How was that? Oh, okay, I got you. Well, no, strictly 3 for me because that was the first one I owned. I had played Sonic 2 over my friend's house, but Sonic 3 was the first one I had total control, and you just couldn't tell me nothing because it's Sonic.
I could safely say there were no bad Sonic the Hedgehog games, so I mean, I really don't think there's a wrong answer there, personally.
Not until they went 3D.
Yeah, right. No, I'm just
come at me, AJ.
Just the 3 and the Knuckles. Yeah, Sonic and Knuckles was great.
Now, I'll break away from Genesis for a little bit. Sonic Mania it's up there with the greatest Sonic games.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty darn.
Is that on the Switch?
It's more
modern. We saw it at Best Buy that day, and I was like, $20. You want to get it? And they're like, nah. So
This guy.
Here we go.
Yeah. Someone eject AJ. Eject AJ, guys.
Oh my gosh.
I liked it.
I'll be in the chat tomorrow, AJ.
Look, I mean, for what it's worth, when when that came out on Dreamcast and the whale or whatever is jumping and breaking the bridge, I mean, that was blowing minds. So we didn't know it sucked yet. Okay.
I was too busy playing the greatest version of Grand Theft Auto 2, and that was on the Dreamcast. So that was my game for that system.
I thought you were going to say you were too busy playing EverQuest. That was around that time frame too.
So I
see you, brother.
It was around that time. Not gonna lie.
I see you, bro.
I gotta say, Sonic and Knuckles. It's the first one that I managed to. No way. I beat Sonic 2. Sonic and Knuckles just holds a special place in my heart. I love the music in that. I love the levels, and if I had to pick any Sonic track to be the best of all of them, it's hard to beat Flying Battery Zone. Like that just is immediate get up and go, and it just speaks to the entire tone of Sonic. But I will say I do think Sonic 3 has an unbelievable soundtrack these days, especially considering what we all know. Like Michael Jackson kind of helped with some of the tracks in an uncredited role, and it's unfortunate because now in the new collections they have to put like the beta music for them. And it sucks, and I can't stand the fact. Did anybody have Moonwalker? I knew it was there, but I was like,
I played it once or twice, but
I preferred it on arcade. If I'm not gonna lie, I preferred the arcade version, but yeah, it was good on Genesis.
I mean, I liked MJ's music. Okay, I was not a huge fan enough to I got to have my Moonwalker. Hell yeah,
I liked the movie. I liked his little movie that he did with that.
That movie was so weird.
I loved it.
Yes,
it
was very weird.
It was great.
Very weird.
Almost like an acid trip.
Especially the rabbit, the whole like claymation rabbit, thing that that whole sequence was pretty fun.
Lord Jesus. But I got to get ready to go, guys. But this has been awesome. This has been absolutely epic. Everyone on this panel is a mad lad. The chat, y'all are all mad lads and mad lasses. AJ, I don't want to hear nothing about no Sonic.
Exactly.
This is the Genesis stream, sir. Mind your manners and respect your elders. And with that being said, y'all have a good night. I'll talk to you
Anime. See you
Thank
later,
you,
man.
Anime.
Nice meeting you, dude.
Appreciate you coming by, man.
All right, deuces.
See ya.
I forgot to tell him. I'm gonna see him for the DBZ stream whenever that comes up. I've had some folks been asking for that one too. So the Genesis, and so let me ask you this: does anyone still have their Genesis?
Yeah. Not the original. I think I got like when they made I regretted it. I got rid of my original rectangular one and got the 3 when it came out because it was smaller. And at the time, I was like, I need the space because I wasn't getting rid of any of my stuff because I had just got the top loader and an NES.
Oh,
that one wasn't
on the
good.
same shelf. That's why I did it. But I do regret it. But I did get my kids the mini one that you got up there.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I joined way back when I joined the army. I sold off like everything before I shipped out, and it went with that initial purge. Ugh,
When
sucks.
when ROMs got real big, I got rid of a ton of because I just didn't have the space anymore. I was in a small apartment at the time, so I just all that stuff on eBay. I sold it, like all of it.
Yeah.
Got good money for it, but I do regret a lot of it.
For us, it was a matter of like if you wanted to get the next system, pony up and sell the one you got,
Yeah,
buddy, because
man.
we're not shelling out. Like when
Yeah.
my mom realized that we could get money for the old crap that I don't play anymore, she's like, "You want the Dreamcast? Pack that Genesis up, buddy." I'm like, and at the time, who would have thought I was like, I'm like, man,
Yeah.
screw Ronald McDonald, dude. I'm done with this guy, man. And so I just recently started getting back into obviously rebuying all this stuff at like twice the price that I paid for it. But
Right.
it is what it is. I want my kids to have it too. So
Paying a nostalgia tax, man.
yes, indeed, dude.
Yeah. I kept mine, and I probably would have kept mine in a box or something. But what happened was about the time the N64 and the PlayStation were dominating, the house I was in at the time. I had a cousin. His mom was in. She was in college forever, and he was about 7, 8 years old, and they were living very frugal in an apartment, just him and his sister and his mom. And he didn't have any game systems. When I heard that, I was like, I told my mom, I was like, okay, pack up the Genesis, all the games, go ahead and let him have it. I'm done playing with it. I wish I had it back, but I'm glad that it went to, him. And
It's like
every time he
giving
sees me,
Buzz to the kids in Toy Story 3. Is that what you like?
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I love that.
Every time I see him now, it's usually one of the first things he likes to bring up and thank me several times for it, because it said it got him through some rough years,
Yeah,
and I'm always happy for that. So, but now I kind of wish like I had not gotten rid of any of my game systems or any of my games. I want them back.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
now
John, talk about the difficulty. Do you ever get your kids to play some of these games and they just get so mad about how difficult they are?
Yep, they're doing it right now with a
all the time.
SpongeBob remake on the Switch.
That's that Genesis collection on the Switch. My kids get so freaking mad at Altered Beast, and I'm like, dude, I have lived with it for a millennia. You've been doing this for 5 minutes, okay?
I was there 3,000 years ago.
Man,
And see, like that's the problem, right? Like there's so many games now that like my kid has obviously like just a wide selection of games to choose from.
They'll rage
Man,
quit and never play
when
it
you
again.
went to Blockbusters and that was your weekend, dude,
Yeah.
was like that one game you rented, you stuck with that game all weekend long. Like I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna beat it, and we're gonna do something. So
I just tell my kids, get good, noob. You
Yeah,
can't stay
get good,
every
dude.
5 seconds like you can all your games. You got one shot. You got to do it.
Hey
Mike,
guys, I
He's
don't
like,
mean
making me
to
choose. Like,
interrupt.
this game's
but,
impossible. And like muscle memory, I went in there and like dominated it. And he was just like, this is
Yeah.
bullshit.
my kids are on the spectrum, so things that are difficult, they have trouble processing like their emotions, like anger, especially my youngest. He goes, when he gets angry, he goes straight to furious number 11. So controllers thrown and foot stomping and all kind of things. So it's kind of like, guys, remember, we're playing games to have fun here. So I try and get them games that feed into that, or they don't got to worry about losing too much. And you can say whatever you want about me, but that's just how I kind of have to cope
Good
with that. So I
parenting,
got
man.
them. I do have I did get them some recent ones that were a lot of fun. I've got the collection. I'll talk about the Genesis collection for just a second.
Yeah.
They have one that was really good for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation. And that was, to me, the best compilation collection. It had like almost every hit. It had all the ones that I've mentioned. But it didn't
Sega
have
Smash
Crash, and it didn't have Rocket Knights. And like, to me, those were some of the biggest ones that I always wanted. And this mini's good, but it's missing Sonic games. It's got Road Rash, but it's missing Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles because of MJ's involvement, obviously. What?
Sonic's the Sega Smash Pack 1 and 2 on the
mod
Dreamcast had everything except Sonic. Yeah.
we can mod it. We can mod it.
Oh,
You get every game you want on there, buddy.
Yeah, I know.
technology.
Hey, yo, guys, I don't mean to interrupt, but I gotta bounce. But I'll check you guys later.
Later,
okay?
you go.
I'll see you
nice meeting
tomorrow,
man.
Ego.
All right, dude. Catch you guys.
Everybody check out Abomination AJ's channel, where he hosts Heroes No Capes every Saturday at noon, and I'm always up in the chat bringing my bullshit. So, sorry.
Man,
Coffee's kind of wearing off a little bit.
We born you there, man.
No. It's just when I sit down for too long, things like this happen. I tell you what I've done kind of recently. I've kind of gone back to a lot of these older game soundtracks for writing ambience. For those who don't know, I'm a bit of an author myself, and when I write, I like to have something to listen to besides just the voices inside of my head. So, there are good fantasy ambiences for that are on YouTube. And sometimes they kind of get a little stale and samey-ish after a while, and I go back to I go back to stuff like Mass Effect, especially. But I find a lot of older like Genesis titles make really good ambient music. And
Echo the Dolphin, that's still like my study music. Yeah.
See, I never had that one. When I did try, I kind of see what they were going for, but I get like about 2 levels in, I'm just kind of like, kind of done with this. Because I know it was hard. I know it got harder level, but I don't even remember much of the music.
It was one of those things. I just never understood it. Like I just never got it.
Right. Like you start off and it doesn't like give you much instruction on what to do, but you kind of have to go far enough in the level. But
right.
I was the same about like the first time I tried. I was like, I don't get what this game's about.
About Echo?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Like with me, I grew up Zelda. Here's Zelda. Here's a sword. You're in the middle of forest. Figure it out, bitch. That's what they did in the first Zelda game. They didn't hold your hand at all. So I loved games like that. But Echo, yeah, it's like, okay, if I go over here, I drown. If I go over here, I get eaten by a shark. But I thought that was part of the exploration. I just wanted to explore.
Right.
Yeah,
I just didn't even know it was that kind of game. Like I didn't even know it was to go and explore in it. I
it definitely doesn't hold your hand.
Like
I wanted that Dreamcast version to be really, really great, but it wasn't.
It wasn't good. No.
There was a Dreamcast version?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was so excited. I pre-ordered it day one. By about hour one, I was like, "This isn't good." So everything, all the classic stuff they tried to take 3D, it didn't usually work. It very rarely worked.
Well, I mean, you can't blame them for doing that because it would be like their known IPs, and it wouldn't be until they started to branch out and try to, do something a little new. Like I remember Power Stone was one that a lot of Dreamcast owners really liked, and looking back at it, I was like, this would have really, I would probably have really liked it at the time, but I never got the Dreamcast, and any game that I did want on Dreamcast ended up getting released on another system later anyway. So
most of them did. Like
Skies of Arcadia.
Arcadia was amazing.
Fucking amazing game.
And I have it on GameCube, and like it's so much better on GameCube too.
It is.
Now the only one that I remember getting Grandia 2 on Dreamcast, and man, that was such a good game.
Still have my Dreamcast, and you know what game I play the most on it? Fucking Virtua Tennis. That's the most addicting game of all time. Man. I love playing my kids on that. It's great.
Oh man.
And that controller is just amazing, John. You really like it, I think. It's really
maybe there's a time, and maybe there's another dimension out there where I stuck with the Dreamcast instead of the PlayStation 1, and I got used to the controller. And but at the time, I was like holding it. I was just like, this is hurting my hands.
I hated it. You had to like take the cord and put it through a little notch.
Yes, that was so stupid. That was the dumbest thing about the controller. I loved the VMU though.
That was a great idea.
I don't know why. I just thought it was so cool. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of dumb, right? Because like I can remember playing like RPGs on it, and it would have like my health on the VMU, but it's also on the screen too.
Right.
So like, what? Who's really looking down to check? But it kind of reminds me now of like some Wii U gamepad kind of stuff there. But yeah.
Wii U is a little underappreciated. I liked a lot of games on that system.
I love the Wii. The Wii is a phenomenal system, dude.
I have a love-hate relationship with the Wii. It was like it's because I'm a Zelda fan, and they made you use those motion controls for Skyward Sword.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, make these optional. Don't make that the only way you can play the game. Like Metroid Prime 1 and 2, excellent. Metroid Prime 3, I got to switch to these motion controls. Fuck you, Nintendo. I was so mad. Yeah.
You're gonna like the only game where it works out well though. Like they're not that they're pretty. They're not that bad.
Oh God. We're playing
Nintendo's
Skyward
like,
Sword
you're
now
gonna
on the
like
Switch.
you're gonna play with our quirky controls, and you're gonna like it.
Yeah, that's the Nintendo way. Yeah, you're gonna buy our $85 controller that you need just for this game. That's what they did with Zelda, and then you do this to shield bash. You do this to stab. And whichever one you wanted to do, he did the fucking opposite one every damn time. And I'm not convinced it wasn't on purpose. So.
That was. I liked the Wii for a lot of things. Getting me into the Xenoblade series was probably the thing that did best.
I love Xenogears on PlayStation 1, but I never got into any of the Xenoblade games.
I only played the demo for it.
We're about to turn this into the JRPG stream here in a second.
Even though I haven't really played very many like the last decade, but yeah, that was from like 1993 through like 2010. That was my thing. In fact, when a lot of RPGs started going into the real time fighting instead of turn based, is when I actually think I started losing a lot of interest in them.
Ken, we actually did talk about a little bit about the Sega CD. Some of us kind of wanted it. Most of us couldn't afford it. I don't even think anyone even actually on the panel actually had it.
I had it, but I had it later. Like as I was working at a game shop and I got it like used. I didn't get it when it was new. No. I did get the 32X though because I wanted to play Doom. I didn't have a nice gaming computer and I wanted to play Doom.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh, yeah. I would have never been able to play that. The only thing I wanted to play on the 32X that even remotely enticed me was Knuckles Chaotix.
Yes.
Which looked very interesting and apparently was not as interesting as it looked.
No, I watched a live stream of that recently too, and it's very bizarre. I won't say it's bad, but it's out there.
I mean, credit for trying something new, but I mostly wanted the Sega CD because I wanted Sonic CD because I was like, oh, this is gonna be like the ultimate Sonic 2D game, and in a lot of ways it kind of is, but the music don't hit for me for a lot of those levels, and the fact you've got 3 acts per level and they're huge, and they're giving you this knowledge you've got to go into the past to destroy the machine to get a good future is like that's a lot of work.
It's a little
for
much.
A Sonic game, and these levels are not small either.
I'd say the best game on Sega CD was Lunar, though. Like that's one of my favorite games of all time.
The fact they've never have they ever re-released that? Because I've always wanted to play that.
Lunar? Oh yeah, man.
I know they re-released it on
PS1.
PS1, but I didn't catch it on PS1 though.
Do you still have your
Silver
Vita?
Star Story? That's the one I played on PS1. Silver Star Story Complete, that nice $70 collection that they put out. I bought that because at the time it was a JRPG. I was giving it a shot. I was a pretty much an easy sell.
Ken flexing us. He won his Sega CD. Lucky duck.
Nice.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I wish I'd done that with my Saturn. Instead of paying $400 fucking for it for the last 5 minutes.
Yikes! I've only won. I've won something myself. Y'all know that. What is it? That website RPGFan.com.
Yeah.
I followed them for years. In the early 2000s, they had a contest for a copy of Wild Arms 3, and I won it. And I wish I still had it, unfortunately, but it was the first play. I had that before I even had a PS2. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'll have a game ready to go. And I played it, and I didn't mind it, but I got hamstrung by something. Apparently, you can only upgrade so many times in the game, and then you can't upgrade anymore. So I was upgrading like the cheapest stuff, which was like you're reloading and the weight of the gun to let you fire quicker. And eventually I hit this point where I couldn't buy any more upgrades, and I was like doing shit damage. And I was going, what is the problem here? And wasn't until I found out later, and then I just didn't want to go back and play it again. So Sega CD. I did want it for Sonic CD, but that was neither here nor there. And, aside from a couple others that looked okay. I remember one game called Popful Mail, and I only remember it because there was an article in a Game Informer, and it had a whole bunch of it had anime cutscenes in it, which that was at the time when anime was starting to kind of come into the geek cultural zeitgeist, if you want to say, nerds are starting to pay attention to Japanime, back at the time.
Yeah, Lunar had anime cutscenes in it too.
Yeah. So did Xenogears.
Yeah,
I love those. Man,
so
Xenogears was a sweet game.
Do you still have your Vita?
Yes. So
Okay.
you can get on Vita.
I'm gonna text you later, yeah, because
Okay.
you have to play Lunar, man. It's
Oh,
seriously
Lunar's
I always
great.
did want to. You know, it was one of those classics that looked
that's
like.
hey, for what it's worth, it's up there with Chrono Trigger for me. So if that gives you any,
If you like
I'm gonna,
that, I got to recommend Star Ocean 2 was really, really good in that same era.
I think all of them are. Oh yeah, Star Ocean
I-
second.
Anything
re-
that had branching narratives where it was decisions and it just upped the replay value for me. And these were 200 plus hour games, you know, and the replay value on them.
Oh, yeah.
Great, sure, because I got to see the different endings. Yeah, I love stuff like that.
I rented Star Ocean 2 and I didn't mind it, but I just never went out of my way to buy it, and I didn't get very far in the game. But I always kind of appreciated when Bryce comes back.
Oh my god.
Wow.
We're on a different time, man. What can I say? I don't know. Ego, at the very least, he's got to go to sleep. He's got that podcast he's going to do tomorrow. I did dovetail that. Guys, if you want to talk for a second, I have got to take a little bio break real quick.
Well, I was going to say, I can't believe we're going to make it through the whole Genesis conversation and not talk about Strider, one of the best games on the system.
I didn't have Strider.
Wow,
I didn't
really?
either.
Man,
Yeah.
that was one of those where it was like almost just like the arcade, so it was like totally rad for me at the time. And
There
same with
was-
Revenge of Shinobi and Shinobi 3. I mean,
Oh,
these were some
Shinobi's great.
legit games.
Yeah.
Gunstar Heroes was incredible. I feel like that's one of those. It's kind of like you said about Fantasy Star Wars. Like it didn't seem like anybody talked about it when it was out,
No,
but now everybody
now
talks
it's a
about
big thing.
it as
Yeah,
one of the
'cause
biggest
when
games.
I can remember getting that as a kid and feeling like nobody else had it, nobody talked about it at school. But because like I'll even talk to some of my other friends that are similar in age and they've never heard of it.
So
I got
but-
that on a collection with columns.
Oh, nice.
Columns like, hey, you guys like Tetris?
Well,
Like, yeah, I'm gonna keep playing Tetris.
let's see. There was Beyond Oasis. I don't think we brought that one up.
That was kind of like a Zelda kind of style, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was an RPG.
Yeah.
Zelda style. And then of course I haven't heard anything of any love for the Shining series, whether Shining in the Darkness, Shining Force, Shining Force 2. Did I miss it?
Someone brought it up earlier.
No, you didn't miss it. I just, as a kid, I didn't play those. I didn't. All my RPGs playing was on the Super at the time, so I didn't catch those.
Well, I'm
How
gonna
about
tell you.
Shadowrun?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Shadowrun.
was
It was
awesome,
the
man.
best. It was the best on Genesis. The one on Super Nintendo was nothing compared to that one. But I want to say about so Shining in the Darkness was a dungeon crawler, but it was first person when you were actually in the game, and it was when you scared up a random encounter, then it went to a turn-based play, that kind of thing. But then in Shining Force, it was actually, I think it was one of the very first strategy, top down. You select different people in your army and then you fight that way, and it was turn based in that regard. So it was very similar. I guess nowadays you could say was it Fire Emblem is close
Right.
to Shining Force, but it just doesn't capture the feel or the essence really that well.
I did actually capture some footage of that game for the intro, but I kind of ran out of room for all the games, and that was one of the ones that got cut.
I love Shining Force. It is the best.
That was another one.
Man, I'm jealous. I feel like if I use any of that footage you use, I get hit with a copyright strike like immediately. It seems like everybody else gets to use video, but if I ever use video, I get a copyright strike. It sucks.
I think the trick is not showing too much of it. Shoot, I may get copyright struck later.
I had like
Screen's
2
still up.
seconds of a clip from The Expanse, the TV show, and I got hit with a.
Oh, well, there you go. It's like old game music and old game footage don't really trigger that kind of stuff, if I'm not mistaken. That was why I asked permission from Dean Harris, because I loved I love that track that I used in the intro, and that's something that's been on repeat on my phone for a while now, and I just need some background, something to get me going. And I didn't, I asked permission first, and I got to send him the link to this, by the way. He gave me permission. He's not going to copyright strike me. Thank you, Dean. Very much appreciated. And he's got a YouTube channel. He does that for a lot of different, mostly Road Rash, but a couple of other games as well. And they're all great tracks. But old game music, and it doesn't seem to hit those algorithm AIs for copyright strikes like other licensed music is. That's why one of the tracks I use for like my Dungeons and Coffee live streams is the Mario Paint creator music.
Oh man,
which that game was fun for a little bit to just mess around in. The Music Maker was fun, but that music you listen to is what I call a good earworm. You ever get a bad song stuck in your head, an earworm you can't get rid of? There are certain tracks that you can play that will get stuck in your head and replace them, and I call them a good earworm, and that track is one of them.
That's up there for me with the Wii eShop, or not? It wasn't even called the eShop at the time. The Wii, like virtual console shopping music, love it. that's what I think of with that.
For sure. Well, so one thing about I just want to button up the music conversation. So the music would get so repetitive for me. So and I had just recently gotten that stereo, with the two tape decks where I could record, and do the dubs and all that stuff, in the early '90s. And so I was I would listen to the radio. I'd turn the music all the way down, and then I would just play through games listening to Top 40 radio and record.
I did that whenever I used to grind XP on Final Fantasy. That's when I would just listen to my new albums.
Yeah.
Now, if I did that, I would be listening to like podcasts and YouTubers.
Right.
But yeah, at the time it was like, I got to grind like 9 levels tonight. That was it when you were a teenager. I got to get to level 99 on Final Fantasy 3. So
I never did that. Whenever I would power level on a game, a JRPG, I only wanted to get a few levels high enough so that I wouldn't be like in the middle of a dungeon without any healing items, low on magic. Because when I got to that
5 levels ahead of recommended.
Yeah, when I got to that boss, I wanted to curb stomp him.
Oh yeah, it was like when I got to them when the story was getting really good, I didn't want to have to stop to get experience points.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure I stayed ahead of it a little bit. So that's what I would do during downtime.
And that's one of the appeals of the JRPGs for me is like there is almost sort of a Zen feel to when you're just sitting back, listening to something, you got some snacks next to you, and you're just grinding, and you're just getting a couple levels up, unlocking a couple of things. You want to talk about? Hold on a second, I'm gonna reach up here. You want to talk about unappreciated gems?
Oh boy,
I do not have.
Out now. Let's see.
Ronald McDonald.
I wish.
Oh, let's see. I do have a couple of disc games. I don't have many disc games.
Man, they still haven't put Star Ocean on Steam. Jesus, man, come on.
No, and I'm mad that they don't have the second one on Switch yet either.
You want to talk about underappreciated games in JRPGs? This was my second JRPG I ever played. First one was Saga Frontier. How many of you ever heard of Thousand Arms?
Right here. Like I said, if it was a
yes!
RPG at the time, I was playing it. That one kind of got buried behind Vagrant Story because Vagrant Story was the big one at the time.
That one wasn't bad.
It came out close to the same time, and everybody was like, they trusted Squaresoft implicitly at the time. So yeah,
this was a blind buy for me. I just liked the cover art, the way it looked on the back. I bought it. I played it. It's a lighthearted little JRPG that tries to integrate a dating sim.
There's a dating sim. Yeah, I was just about to ask
part
you
of the
about
game
that.
Mechanics. It's fun. It's funny. It's not for everybody, but like I want to stream this game one day because this was Mike. If you ever read my book that I'm coming out with, The Black Crown, there's an Easter egg in there from Thousand Arms. You might be the only person who reads the book to get it.
Let's go like what Christopher Rocchio puts out his books, and he puts like Dio references in it and shit. And I'm always like, I saw that shit. Yes. Yeah. So, hey,
I got a couple Easter eggs. I got a Norm Macdonald joke in there.
I got a Macdonald joke.
A Norm Macdonald joke in my book. I'm not going to say what it is, and only a Norm Macdonald fan will be like, "Oh yeah." I got a wrestling nomenclature or colloquialism that's in there. Only someone who's watched pro wrestling for a long time or specifically WWE for a long time would get it. It'd be like one of those, it'd be like that meme with Leonardo DiCaprio on the couch. So.
They were either putting all these on Steam or they were putting these all on collections. It's a shame they aren't doing more of these collections.
Yeah, and I think you've got game companies, I don't think, have done a whole lot.
No,
as far as
they can just call it a remake, put a fresh coat
Yeah.
of paint on it, and sell it again for $50. You know, that's what they do.
they really could. Like they could call it a special edition. Why do you think that company Limited Run Games gets the kind of business they do? Because a lot of collectors just want a newer or updated version of their the game that they played.
Look, guys,
the new
nostalgia's big. I mean,
Yeah.
we just talked about something, 30 years old for 2 hours. Nostalgia's big, especially with Gen Xers. You just put this stuff out in collections. We're going to buy it.
Yeah.
So just think about it.
Yeah. Well, guys, look, we're coming up on 2.5 hour mark here, and I'm glad we kind of got as many opinions from everybody as possible. I think we will go ahead and wind the stream down, but I want to think. I keep looking at the chat. Everybody's talking about a lot of games that we were all trying to keep it on Sega, but that's okay. I don't care if the streams get derailed a little bit. I didn't think we'd get through those questions as quick as we did, but hey, it is what it is.
This makes me think of games that I got into later, but it started with the Genesis.
Right.
A lot of these things. Except Phantasy Star was kind of what led me to Final Fantasy, after the first one. So,
yeah. And I've always got the desire. If I got the desire to go back and play at least one Phantasy Star. Which one should I play, Mike?
4 is probably the
4,
most
yeah.
playable. Yeah, and it's probably got the best story. But like I said, 3 just has a soft place in my heart because I love branching storylines.
Yeah. Are they a bit grind heavy like them early JRPGs were?
Not as much as you would think. But I mean, if you've played anything during that era, it's not going to be as much as you've done in some of those other games where you have to get to level 99 by the end to beat the game.
Yeah, because look,
Final
I love
Fantasy
it.
4.
I love it, but Breath of Fire and Breath of Fire 2, ooh boy. 2 steps and attack.
Yeah.
That was not the worst I've ever seen, though. The worst I've ever seen, and I don't know if y'all have ever played it. You ever heard of Beyond the Beyond for PlayStation 1? It's kind of infamous for being like a really shitty JRPG.
So
I own this. I bought it at a pawn shop. I own this for 1 day.
That good, huh?
I've never seen a hit rate in a JRPG so high before. I spent 30 minutes on 3 rooms. It is literally 2 steps, fight. 2-3 steps, fight. Like, wow. And what was even funnier, if you go look at the cutscenes for it, like characters would emote by their outline pulsing. And it was meant to represent like literally every emotion of the emotional spectrum. You're happy, they would pulse. If they were sad, they would pulse. If they were embarrassed, they would pulse. It was weird. There were entire conversations happening with characters literally just pulsing at each other. They're just outlines. It was so strange. Oh, well. But I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and shut it down here, guys. I want to thank everybody for coming in. Robert, if you're watching, I'm sorry you couldn't make it, buddy. David, thank you for helping warm the seat. Ego, Anime, thank you guys for coming. Justin, thanks for coming in too. And thanks to Bryce. I know you couldn't stay too long, but we were glad to have you here. And Mike, thank you very much for dropping on in, sir.
Thanks for letting me, man. I mean, I just was joking, saying like, "Hey, if you need an extra person, let me know." And
Yeah.
he said, "Hey, I got room." I said, "Shit, let's do it."
No, it's hard, these streams, getting everybody in one place, coordinating everybody, like 6 people. And I figured something would go awry, and it did, but that's okay.
I always have.
I didn't
drop
expect
out
that,
the
but I
last minute.
expected not to expect something, so it doesn't count. For everyone that's watching, I'm going to play that intro one last time as we get played out. And everybody's channel is in the description with links to everyone's channel. Give everybody a sub and some love. Appreciate everyone for coming by in the chat. I'm sorry if we couldn't get to too many questions or comments. I didn't want to take too much time away from my guests. And what else can I say? Sega does what Nintendo don't.
Sega!
Sega! You guys have a good evening.
Thanks,
You
man.
too. Thanks.